Hey, warmer brother Elo! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got a great podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2, someone who's going to be joining for the first time, Arielle Schafer. She does some really good work with her play-by-play and her sideline work for ESPN/ESPN Plus. She covers the Atlantic Sun and the SoCon. We're going to be seeing those two conferences in full force here in the next few days, and we're going to be talking with her about the landscape that we've been seeing out of them. We're going to talk about a few teams that she thinks are really ascending in the sport as well. She does a great job both on the men's side of things and women's side of things, and I'm not going to go on too much of a soapbox here because we always want to keep it to the picks and we want to keep it to college basketball, but there are some women out there that are doing just some absolutely excellent work in basketball, whether that be the men's side of things, women's side of things. I don't have a lot of female guests on the podcast, and I've reached out to a lot of people I think are doing a good job, because you're always going to see on social media the people being like, they got the job because of looks and everything like that. We don't go into the bad. We instead go into the good, and if there's anything that you ever find that you don't like, the best way to go against it is to instead look at the good, in my opinion, and instead to show people what things are supposed to be about. Someone like an Arielle does a great job with her play-by-play work, of her commentary, like we had on the podcast last week, Alex White. She does an absolutely excellent job with her handicapping. She comes a family of handicappers. I'm looking to try to get on people that I think are doing a great job in the sphere, and Arielle is certainly one of them, and you're going to hear that in segment number 2, so I'm very much looking forward to that. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Well, I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today. We had a fun day of college basketball on Tuesday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Nebraska's starting to fall a little bit fast, and Iowa's covering spreads. Now 15-10 against the spread. Nebraska's still been pretty solid as well at 14-10-1 against the spread, and this was a dead under, and Nebraska has been a really good under team. 8 overs to 17 unders thus far this season, but Iowa, they persevere, they get the job done 57-52 in an almighty slog of a game as Bennett Sturtz 25 of the 57 points for Iowa here. Nebraska just 5 of 24 from 3. Iowa not much better at 6 of 23 from the outside, but for Iowa, they go 17 of 18 at the free throw line. They win the rebound battle 37-24, and you also had Cooper Koch be able to put in their 10 points, and for Nebraska, just not a lot doing from your main guys. Price Hampert was the guy that led the way with 13 points, so that was rock solid out there. Wisconsin has been really ascending over the last few weeks, but this was rough. Without John Mobley, Ohio State, they got things going early enough, and they find a way to be able to pull off a 86-69 win. For Wisconsin, a little bit hit or miss when they're away from home, just 7 of 26 from three-point range and 8 of 16 at the free throw line. That's how Wisconsin basketball. Ohio State loses his turnover battle 14-12, but they go a sizzling 11 of 21 from 3. Devin Royal, boy was he Royal, 25 points. He goes 4 of 7 from 3. Bruce Sorton, 27 points, and for Ohio State, they win the rebound battle 35-24, so they find a way in that one. Michigan, they put their foot down on Purdue, 91-80 the final. They were up 16 points at the half. I believe at one point they were up 20 plus points. They go 13 out of 23 from 3-point. Elliot Kidu, Skip to my Lou for 17 points, 7 assists, did have 4 turnovers in this game, and Michigan does lose the turnover battle 14-6, but they make up for it by winning that rebound battle 39-31. Obviously, did a great job from 3. And Drake Hoffman-Run, 27 points, 12 rebounds. And for Fletcher Lawyer, just 11 points. He needed a little bit more there. Braden Smith, he did have 4 steals, 6 assists, but also 3 turnovers, and went just 4 of 13 from the floor. So Michigan, they were able to make a very loud statement, and they got the job done out there. How about these guys being able to get the job done? Michigan State all over UCLA, 82-59 the final. This is a game that goes over the total. And for Michigan State, they've been a pretty rock-solid team in terms of covering at the home thus far this season, 12-12-2 overall this season. UCLA, they are now 10-15-1 against the spread, so that's been rough for them. Tyler Bilodeau provided 22 points, and he also had in this game a ejection of Steven Jamerson, not by the refs though. Mick Cronin ejected his own player from the game, so that was good, clean family fun right there. And for Michigan State, 14 out of 27 from 3, no fears with Jeremy Fears, 16 points, 10 assists at just 1 turnover, so Michigan State, really good domination out there. St. Louis has been one of your best teams in all of college basketball this year, but how about Rhode Island? 81-76 the final. They need to win some games to be able to save Archie Miller's job, but hey, that's a good starting spot right there. Obviously, the St. Louis team has been one of your better against the spread teams this year at 15-8-2 against the spread, but they come up short in this game despite the fact that the offense was fine. The offense 8-21 from 3-point, 20-26 at the free throw line. Here's where they lost though. They lose the turnover battle 18-14, and for Rhode Island, Jonah Hinton was hitting it hard. 29 points, and he goes 9 of 15 from 3-point range. So Rhode Island, a very, very good win for them. A nice win for NC State. They take it to North Carolina by a count of 82-58 for North Carolina. As we know, they're dealing with a whole bunch of injury. They did not have Henry Vassar out there. They did not have Caleb Wilson out there, and they actually still won the rebound battle 40-38, but they went 5 of 33 from 3-point range. That's not going to win you a lot of games. And Darion Williams, 13 points. Kadir Copeland does it all. For Kadir Copeland, 0 turnovers, 7 assists, 6 rebounds, 20 points. Doesn't get much more efficient than that. So NC State, a nice clean winner out there. Miami of Ohio stays undefeated, and they get you another cover. Now 17-6 against the spread. Miami of Ohio, by the way, has also been one of your best over teams in all of college basketball as well. For this Miami of Ohio bunch, they are now 16 overs to 7 unders, 86-77 the final. Now, this one depended upon your closing number, as I believe I saw some 162.5s out there. This closed more around 163.5, so you just barely got an under if you took the number just before tip. But Peter Suter, 23 big points for Miami of Ohio. As this had some good 3-point shooting in there for UMass, 10 of 20 from 3-point range for Miami of Ohio, 10 of 23 from the outside. And Miami of Ohio does lose the rebound battle 33-26, but they dominate the turnover battle 13-7. So the Redhawks, they continue to be able to get the job done for you. SMU, they get a nice win over Louisville. This by a count of 95-85. SMU has obviously been a pretty rock solid team to the over thus far this season. 16 overs, 9 unders, and a push thus far this campaign. And for SMU, they were able to do a nice job in terms of dialing it up from the outside. They go 9 of 19 from 3-point range. Ron Pierre was your main man with 25 points, but Kevin Miller, he was able to boop the competition with 9 assists, 23 points. And Louisville, they go 13 of 24 from 3, but lost the turnover battle 17-10. You'd have Mikal Brown throwing there 29 points, 4 assists, 5 rebounds, but 7 turnovers. That turned out to be very, very costly out there. Doing this as Arizona State and Texas Tech is doing battle. Do I have to have this up at midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern, so may not have that in time. But for Florida, they have been a very good cover team in conference play. 9-4 against the spread in SEC play. Did not cover a very big number in this game, though. South Carolina able to hold within 20 plus, 76-62. The final is for Florida, obviously dominated the battle on the glass, 47-30. Big concern is that outside shooting. They do go just 5 of 19 from 3. Now, Ruben Chinielo, 15 points, 17 rebounds. Alex Condon, 20 points, 10 rebounds. But Condon did have 6 turnovers in this game. South Carolina does win the turnover battle, 14-11. Been a less than savory year for them, and they go just 4 of 19 from 3-point. But hey, Michi Johnson, the Michi was able to give you 22 points. So that was a nice quality cover if you took South Carolina out there. And this was not a quality cover, as if you're looking at one of your lesser teams against the spread in all of college basketball, this should come as no surprise to you. Air Force has been one of those lesser teams. For Air Force, they are now 7-18 against the spread, and for New Mexico, just completely below them out there. Actually now a really good over team, 17 overs to 8 unders thus far this season. And for Air Force, they give you a nice 98-61 skid mark in this game, as for Air Force, they allow New Mexico to shoot 55% from the floor and 15 of 31 from 3-point range. New Mexico wins the rebound battle 48-23. They win the turnover battle 12-11. And for Air Force, you had Cam Sanders chip in their 13 points, and that's about all that you had for Air Force in this game. So that was less than great. If you're looking at one of your better against the spread teams in all of college basketball, I think that this will come as a surprise to a lot of people, but it's out there in the MAC, and obviously by Miami of Ohio has been great, but how about Eastern Michigan? Now 19-7 against the spread thus far this season. They get the job done against Central Michigan, this by a count of 66-54, and it's not been great for Central Michigan, to say the least, but I mean, this Eastern Michigan defense has been very rock solid. They hold Central Michigan to 2 of 17 3-point shooting, got up from the Chippewas going 10-20 at the free throw line, but even though Eastern Michigan lost the turnover battle 18-14, they won the rebound battle 39-33 with Mohamed Habab, 14 rebounds in this game. Gregory Lawson, great name, 17 points, so they find a way to be able to get the job done, so that was a relatively fun one. Gardner-Webb has been one of your lesser teams against the spread, and Charleston Southern looked like they were going to run and hide with this game, but Gardner-Webb's able to pick up a cover now, 10-14-1 against the spread, 75-66 final in this one. As for Gardner-Webb, they didn't necessarily light it up at 6-27 from three-point, and they lose the rebound battle 48-39. They play even up with the turnover battle 10-10, but hey, you know what? You got 15 points out the bench out of Jameis Ferrere, so they were able to get a nice cover there. So yay verily for Gardner-Webb, and yay verily in this one for Central Florida, 82-71. They get the job done against TCU. It's been a little bit of an up-down all-around season for this UCF team, but they are now 12-13 against the spread. They've been a pretty solid under team as well at 15 unders to 10 overs thus far this season, and this was one that was barely able to stay under the total. This was a closing number in a lot of places more in that neighborhood, about a 154.5. You had Jeremy Burks be able to supply 23 points for this UCF team. They go 8-20 from 3-point and 18 out of 20 at the free throw line, so a rock solid performance out of them. If you're looking at another team that's actually been pretty solid to the under, that'd be LSU. 10 overs, 14 unders, and a push. They did not play an under against Texas, but they were able to get a nice quality cover. As Texas, they get the win, but they do not cover this game. 88-85, the final is Max McKinnon, 27 points. You're still dealing with the injury to De'Don Thomas that has been very much hurting LSU, but 5-12 from 3-point. McKinnon off the bench, 27 points, and Texas, they win this game thanks to going 7 of 13 from 3-point. Jalen Swain, 21 points, 10 rebounds for a double-double for Kentucky. The issues that they've had this season continue as Georgia, 86-78. They go on the road, they get the job done for Kentucky against the spread. Right now they are checking in 12-13, which honestly you'd think it would be worse at this point. And for Georgia, it's been a little bit of an up-down all-around season for them. They are checking in just 10-14-1 against the spread. But for Georgia, Blue Kane was able to give you 21 points. And for Georgia, 14 out of 31 from 3-point. Kentucky did shoot 12 of 30 from 3. Colin Chandler showed up, 6 of 10 from 3, 18 points. Ortega Owe, 28 points, but not a lot off the bench. And for Kentucky, they lose the turnover battle 13-7. So their woes very much do continue. You have a few teams in the MAC that have also been, shall we say, less than savory cover teams thus far this season, as UMass now 10-16 against the spread with the loss that they took to Miami of Ohio. Buffalo 15-9 against the spread. They have legitimately been able to cover quite a few numbers for you. They were in a nip and tuck spot against Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois goes on the road 72-70 final. So this was not one of those covers for Buffalo because Northern Illinois goes 13 out of 28 from 3-point. Gianni Cobb, well, he shucked in there 23 points, so that was great. And Angelo Breezy, 25 points for Buffalo. Ryan Sable at 24. Runs the team at 21 points, so that wasn't going to cut it. And for Northern Illinois, they win the rebound battle 35-25, so a little bit of a rare non-cover out there for Buffalo. Ball State now 9-14-1 against the spread, and they went up against an Ohio team that is now 10-15 against the spread. Ball State against an Ohio team that was 262nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis entering in the night. They had 15 points in the first half, 69-57. Ohio, they're able to get the job done. They do get the cover in this game, thanks to going 8-21 from 3-point. Jackson Pavletsky was able to supply 18 points, so that was a nice quality winner for them. And Kent State 10-15 against the spread, but they were able to get the job done against Bowling Green. This by a count of 78-71. Morgan Sanford, 27 big points, and for Bowling Green, just 4 of 19 from 3-point in this one, and they go 25 out of 36 at the free throw line, 28 out of 40 for Kent State. So lots of missed free throws. If you, like me, had the over of about 149.5 to 150.5, should be feeling very, very salty about that one. But you know what, Kent State, they do find a way to be a persevere out there. And then you have another very good team in Villanova that was able to get the job done on Tuesday, as well as they are now 17-9 against the spread. They were facing off against Xavier 92-89. This game goes final in overtime, and for Xavier, they open up in a lot of books right around about a 4 to a 4.5 point underdog. They close right around there. So Villanova, they don't quite get the cover, but they do go 12 of 34 from three-pointers. Xavier, 10 of 23 from three-pointers. And Xavier has been one of your interesting over teams as well. Now, 19 overs to 7 unders thus far this season. So they're tied with Providence as the second best over team in all of college basketball. So they've been able to cash you some tickets on that front. If you're looking at one of your top under teams that were in action, Ball State, another one of them, 6-17-1 against the spread. We dove in there. And Bowling Green with their under against Kent State, they're now 7 overs to 17 unders. Northern Illinois, 7 overs to 16 unders as well. So we've got a lot of, shall we say, underwhelming teams up there in the MAC right now. And then on the national landscape, we have been having a lot of unders this year. 2,282 unders to 2,222 overs. So the under rate is about 50.7% in all of college basketball for the season. And underdogs are hitting at about 51.2%, 2,307 and 2,196 against the spread. Meanwhile, if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, it's been a very overwhelming last week or so. 53.4% of games going over, 180 overs, 157 unders. Meanwhile, the underdogs are having a little bit of a rough go of it. 167 and 170 against the spread at 49.6%. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we're seeing trend-wise. Coming up next, how about if we do chat it up with Arielle Schafer? She does a great job in terms of taking a look at things out there in the Atlantic Sun and also the SoCon, both on the men's and women's side of things. Going to be a great chat with her on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Houston Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Great to have this lady aboard as we've got Arielle Schafer on. She does a great job with regards to a lot of the play-by-play work that you're going to be finding out there in the SoCon along with the Atlantic Sun. She's based out there in the great state of Alabama, taking a look at both of those conferences. She's a part of just Alabama in general. She is an alum over there, so certainly a lot of SEC love on this podcast today as she's doing a great job taking a look at both the men's and women's side of basketball. You're able to follow her on the old Twitter/X at her first and last name, Arielle, and then an underscore and her last name, Schafer. One F on Schafer, and the first name is spelled Arielle. And Arielle, great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you for having me.
Great to have you aboard. And Arielle, I know that you've been doing a great job with regards to a lot of your play-by-play work, both out there in the Atlantic Sun and the SoCon. And here on Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to be seeing some big games out there in the SoCon. And before we dive in on any particular teams and any just particular games in general for this upcoming week, what have you made out of the SoCon this year? Because it's a conference that we've seen Furman, for the most part, be able to run over the last few years. Obviously, Chattanooga was able to have their come up this year, and it just feels like a much more open conference this year than it has been in the past.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy, right? I mean, there's like 5 or 4 games left in the regular season, and you have, of course, ETSU at the top of the conference, but then you have Mercer and Wofford, who completely just not came out of nowhere, but just putting together great resumes, tied, and then you have like a 4-way tie for 4th, which is crazy, with Furman and Stanford, and UNCG can make a come up too. And WCU is not in, you can't count them out. It's just so much fun. And I think the best part about the SoCon is, like, yes, records do matter, but when each of these teams play one another, it's like their records are set at 0-0. Like, they do their homework, they're prepared. There's so many great players in the SoCon. It's a very underrated conference, in my opinion. But there's some great athletes, great stories, great storylines, and there's been some really fun games that have gotten a lot of national recognition with ESPNU and CBS Sports coming a couple times specifically for Sanford. I do know that because I would do the women's broadcast and then they would do the men's broadcast on ESPNU. So it's been a lot of fun. I have been covering the SoCon for about 2-3 years now, and I love both the men and women's game on that side.
Oh, it has been a lot of fun to take a look at the SoCon this season as well. And I know that there's been a lot of teams that have just sort of come from out of nowhere, as you were talking about. And who would you say is the biggest surprise? Because I asked that with being on the gambling side of things, and Mercer has been one of your best teams in terms of making you money all season long. And I feel like they perhaps have been the most unexpected team because while Mercer has had their struggles on the road, they've been pretty much unbeatable at home this year. As a matter of fact, I believe they're undefeated at home this year.
Yeah, they sit at 12-0 at home this year, and they have 2 huge home games this week. When you look at first, they're going to play Chattanooga on Thursday, and then they're going to host Sanford on Saturday. And those are 2 teams, specifically with Chattanooga, trying to move up in the SoCon ranks to avoid playing in that first day of the SoCon tournament and having to play 3 days worth of games in order to even make the semis or make the championship. But Sanford's hot right now. They have 5 wins in a row, but no one is playing better than Mercer, too. But I've been interested to see how, ever since that Sanford game against Mercer, when Sanford held them to 49 points, this is the SoCon's best offensive team, and they average anywhere between 78 to 80 points per game offensively. They held them to 49, and a lot of teams since then have been able to really reproduce what Sanford was doing defensively against Mercer to kind of shake some things up. But I also have my eye on Wofford. Yes, their best player right now is injured, but the fact that they had to bring in a new coach late in September, restart this roster because of the unfortunate incident that happened over the summer and the problems with the NCAA, the fact that they're fighting for a regular season title is just crazy. And there's no seniors on that team at all. They're so young. Their coach, he has been a joy to work on. That was my last game I did. Kevin Giltner, I mean, crazy story. A Wofford alum, knows what it takes to win. So I have my eyes on Mercer and Wofford. You can't count those 2 out, but you also can't count out Furman because they're finally healthy again. And no one does a postseason run better than Furman and Bob Ritchie, who has definitely been one of the staples or one of, I would say, on the Mount Rushmore of the SoCon when you think about current coaches right now.
Oh, and you lead me right into it because with Furman, always one of the best 2-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. You mentioned the fact that Cooper Bowser, who's been averaging about 12.6 rebounds per game, is back for them. And it's a massive game for them against ETSU, East Tennessee State, on Wednesday. And just what do you make out of this battle? Because we know that with East Tennessee State, year in and year out, typically they're a team that dominates on the inside, and they're still really good and not allowing second and third chances on the glass. But it's been a team that's almost changed their identity a little bit this year in terms of being one of the better teams in generating turnovers in all of college basketball and have been much better with their perimeter play. Meanwhile, for Furman, it's been a little bit more shaky in terms of taking care of the ball, but when they take care of the ball, typically they hit their shots.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Furman is by far one of the biggest teams. We're the biggest team in the SoCon. And I saw this crazy stat. They're like within one of the biggest teams in the KenPom rankings when you think about Division I basketball. When they came to Sanford, Sanford was so outmatched by Furman. I think the tallest or the smallest guard they had was 6'5", 6'6". And when you think about Furman, too, yes, they have Cooper Bowser back, and they're one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the SoCon, but definitely you have to put them up nationally, too. They know how to hit the offensive glass so well. And it's going to be a tough challenge for ETSU. You know, they're coming off a really heartbreaking loss, an overtime loss to Sanford that went toe-to-toe. Sanford was able to stop that perimeter shooting for the most part. So with that defense, so they got to figure out a way to be able to box Furman out. And you're also at Furman. That's a really hard place to play in the SoCon. It definitely has that home court advantage. But, I mean, ETSU's looking back in the win column. And if they if they get back in the win column, say against Furman, and then they also win on Saturday as well, they have, got back on the course to control their own destiny to win the regular season title in the SoCon, which deservedly so. They're sitting at 11-3 right now. But also, too, with Furman, I think, yes, they have the depth and the experience and the height, and they know how to crash the boards. They know how to finish well off of 2 feet. But Alex Wilkins, the freshman point guard for them, is one of the best freshman players I have ever seen. I don't know how Coach Ritchie's going to be able to hold on to him next year, right? Like, he's going to get so many Power Four looks too between the SEC and the Big Ten. He's averaging 17 points per game. It's fifth in the league. And he also has 5 assists per game. That's second best in the league as just a freshman. Super dynamic. And Furman's also second in the league in assists. So they do a really good job of making sure they're, finish off with 2 feet and maybe getting everyone involved. So that is for sure Wednesday. That will be the best game of the week, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. And you mentioned Wilkins. He reminds me a little bit of Mike Bothwell from a few years ago as well, who was doing such a great job when Furman was able to knock off Virginia in the NCAA tournament. A little bit of shades of that, as we do have Arielle Schafer, does great work over at ESPN, ESPN Plus, with all the SoCon broadcasts out there in the great state of Alabama, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And no doubt that's going to be interesting. But what else I think is interesting is that one of the teams that has been towards the top of the conference over the last few years has been Chattanooga. And I don't think anyone saw them currently being behind the Citadel in the SoCon standings, but that's where we sit right now. It's been a very interesting year for them, but they've got a golden opportunity against, ironically enough, the Citadel on Saturday, and a few nights from now, Mercer on the road as well. What do we make out of this Chattanooga team? Because when you look at the defense, they're one of the least efficient in the country, but it's not necessarily because teams are shooting a massive percentage against them. It's been more or less because they haven't generated a lot of turnovers. They haven't necessarily done the world's greatest job on the boards, but as we both know as well, this is a Chattanooga team that's going to light it up from 3. And if Chattanooga's on any given night, I feel like they could be the spoiler in this conference.
Oh, no, 100% too. And they're so well coached. They understand what it takes to win, right? I mean, you have a coach who knows his identity and knows who this program is and knows what hard-nosed work is. He knows how to win those gritty ones, right? And what it takes to build a team. And I think, yes, it's been an up and down year, but a lot of those games have been close. And I also think, too, a team can get cold, but they also can get hot at the right time. And you don't want to peak too early, right? I mean, there's a lot of eyes specifically on Chattanooga coming from last year. I think that team, if they can just limit those turnovers and maybe not think, oh my gosh, I have to run this play and I have to pass it on the wing, right? Because that's part of the play. No, just see what you have to, take a moment, be able to slow it down, because the SoCon, I've noticed, just because I cover Stanford for the majority, and I've been covering them for the past 2 years, the full court has been interesting this year. It's been a lot of half court. Like, Furman's the only team really I've seen pressed in the full court, and that's what Stanford had some problems with Furman. But I'm interested to see what Chattanooga does. I think they can make a run at a good time. They have the players, and I think, too, for them is like, yes, maybe they're not the best right now, but they do rank in the top 5 in multiple categories as a team in the SoCon stats. When you think about rebounding and also too with, offensive production, but it's just the turnovers that are really killing them right now.
Yep, it certainly has been. And for Chattanooga, it's a case where for them, they're not really turning the ball over a lot on offense. They're just not generating any on defense as well. So it's going to be interesting to see if they hunker down a little bit more with that as well. And Arielle, I know that you were talking with me off air, and you're going to be doing some Atlantic Sun this weekend as well. And on Wednesday and on Thursday, we've got some very good games out there. And just before we dive into a game or two with regards to the Atlantic Sun as well, what have you made out of this conference? Because I feel like this is one of the more interesting mid-major races out there, with one of the more underrated teams in all of college basketball, and Austin Peay leading the way, and an upstart Central Arkansas team who I don't think they've ever had a 20-win season at the Division I ranks. They've been at the Division I ranks for about a decade and a half. They're a very close number 2 to Austin Peay as well. And then you got just a smorgasbord of teams that are hovering right around 6 and 8 and 5 and 9, trying to be able to make this Atlantic Sun tournament and make things interesting.
Oh no, it's definitely been a change of pace. And when I watching the men's side too, I knew what UNA did last year and that incredible season, the leadership from their coach and the players that they had. But it's been so fun to watch these games go into overtime. There's been a lot of overtime battles too, especially when you think about EKU and UNA last week on prime time. How historic was that? Specifically up in Florence, it was a sold-out arena. How fun. And I think that race is really, really tough. Austin Peay has some tough guys on their team, right? I mean, these guys are just great two-way players. They know how to, finish off with 2 feet, get to the basket, but they also know how to distribute the ball pretty well. And I think that's going to be a tough race. But I've been spoiled in the women's side too. That's a tough battle right now too. And specifically when you're thinking about UNA, they've been limited a little bit. They have had a lot of injuries, and there's been a lot of injuries that have been plagued. Unfortunately, it's part of the game on both sides. But there's just been such gritty games, like some traditional stuff. I've seen a lot of traditional post play, specifically on the women's side, which has been really fun to see. And you don't really see that very often nowadays, specifically on the women's game. But that's a really fun conference. That's a tough one too. And I honestly think whoever gets the SoCon winner or whoever gets the ASUN winner in the tournament, that's going to be a tough first round game for whoever gets it, the SEC, Big Ten, ACC, whoever gets that opponent coming out from both the men's and women's side. It's going to be a tough battle for sure.
Oh, I'm right there with you, and I'm going to be very intrigued to see if Austin Peay or Central Arkansas are going to be able to win in the Atlantic Sun, because those are the two teams I really have my eye on, especially the Governors of Austin Peay. They've been playing some very good basketball this season, so they're an interesting team, and they played a very interesting game, by the way, against the leader in the SoCon, ETSU, where that was a one-point game in non-conference play as well, to your point, as we do have Arielle Schafer, does great work with some play-by-play work over at ESPN, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and certainly there is going to be a lot of great battles that are going to be happening both in the Atlantic Sun and the SoCon, both on Wednesday and on Thursday. And out of those two conferences, is there one game in particular that you do have starred for the next few days? Because I do think that there are going to be some great battles out there. And the one that really was catching my attention just at first glance was that Lipscomb versus Bellarmine game, because Bellarmine, as we know, the defense is not necessarily going to be the forte of this team, but boy, oh boy, are they really efficient on offense. And I know you've covered a lot of Lenny Acuff with him now being at Samford. He was at Lipscomb, led them to the NCAA tournament last year, and it feels like the transition has really gone well with them, and Lipscomb has been a team that has built a lot of confidence here in the second half of the season.
No, they have too, and that's the best part, right? You don't want your teams peaking in the middle of December. You want them peaking around now in order to have the momentum going into these conference tournaments. And Lipscomb, with Lenny Acuff and the way that he plays and the way his game is, it's going to be very aggressive. It's going to be very quick. They love to run the baseline. They love to shoot from beyond the arc. And it's been really cool to see Lipscomb not take a step back, but continue to take a step forward in their new era too. And that's definitely a game I have my eye on for sure when you think about standings as well, because 4 games left of the regular season, every game does matter. And people are treating this like a tournament game. They're treating it like a one and done for the rest of the regular season. So that's a game I have my eye on the ASUN. But the other game I have my eye on is Saturday, is going to be Samford at Mercer, specifically because it's going to be at Mercer. Mercer's trying to sneak their way up, trying to break even or maybe give some space away, some extra insurance from Wofford. But then they have a big target on their back. They're trying to get back offensively. They're going to be at home. They're going to be out for vengeance against Samford because they were held to 49 points per game and they average anywhere between 70 to 80 points per game. But the big one too is going to be Furman at Wofford. That's a huge rivalry game in the interstate. It's like I-85, like these two schools, not too far. Furman at Wofford is going to be a massive game on Saturday.
Oh, it is going to be a massive game, and we're in for some great action, both the Atlantic Sun and the SoCon this weekend. Arielle, I want to wrap it up with this, because I know that you do a great job both on the SoCon and the Atlantic Sun side of things, but you're based out there in the great state of Alabama, so you get to see a little bit of SEC, you get to see a few of the other conferences as well. Who's just a team or two nationally that has really been catching your attention and might be flying under the radar? It could be a high major team, low major team, just a team or two that's catching your attention that maybe we should be talking about a little bit more as we're less than 4 weeks away from Selection Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, no one's playing better than Michigan, right? I mean, of course, they're doing fantastic, and they got a big, huge matchup, 2 huge games this week, right? I mean, no one's playing better than them. But what about Texas Tech out of the Big 12? Grant McCasland, my first job, fun fact, was in Lubbock, Texas, covering Texas Tech. I spent 2 years there. So I was there at the end of Chris Beard, the whole Mark Adams era, and then I got there when Grant McCasland first got there. And it's been so incredible to see what he's been able to do out in West Texas. JT Toppin is one of the best players in the country right now. They're playing so well inside and out. But the one thing about Grant McCasland team is they're going to do the gritty things right. They're going to rebound. They're going to box out. They're going to limit their turnovers. They're going to assist ratio is going to be through the roof. And their screen to assist ratio is going to be through the roof. Like, they just do everything right. And Texas Tech is one of my favorite teams, but it's also sticking with Samford with the SEC too. You can't count out Texas A&M. Like, I mean, let's look at what they've been able to do in Bucky McMillan's first year. And I mean, we all knew last year at Samford, covering him, like he was going to be big. We all knew that. And the way that they completely generate and the possessions that they have per game is up in the high 90s, up close to 100. And what he was able to do at Alabama, yes, unfortunate that they weren't able to get that win, but huge wins at Auburn, going toe-to-toe with Florida. There are so many other big wins that has had. That Texas A&M is one of my favorite teams heading into the SEC tournament for sure. But you got to keep an eye on Texas Tech. Grant McCaslin, telling you right now, they're going to go far in the tournament.
Absolutely, and that Texas Tech defense as the season has went along has been getting better and better as well. That's one thing that his teams always do well, and I think that they're peaking at just the right time. And Arielle, I know you're doing a tremendous job covering this great game of basketball. You do some work on the men's side of things. You do some work on the women's side of things. If it's out there in the southern part of the country, you're doing a great job of covering it all. So love to get people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
You guys can follow me on Instagram, X, where I still call it Twitter, but X, TikTok, Facebook, Arielle_Schafer. So I'm very active on all my platforms. I do love me some X and Twitter. I do love to tweet out some stats and stuff, but yeah, that's where you can find me. Also, I'm on YouTube too at Arielle Schafer. And yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. It was great to be able to get Arielle aboard. She does a tremendous job taking a look at this great game of college basketball, men's side of things, women's side of things. She's got you covered there, and it was great to get her on the show today. So big thanks to Arielle for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. That was a lot of fun getting Arielle Schafer aboard. She does a great job out there in the southern part of the country, out there in the great state of Alabama, doing play-by-play work on the men's and women's side for the Atlantic Sun. She does some great work with the SoCon as well, doing a great job just taking a look at this wonderful sport. First time I had her on, I do not think that it's going to be the last, as I was very impressed, and it was some great insight. So a big thanks to Arielle for joining me in last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_D1. We're going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the bigger conference games first in time order, and then these are the conferences that are going to be at the bottom. We have a little bit of MEAC action here on this Wednesday, the Atlantic Sun, the Patriot League. Along with that, if we have any SWAC games, I don't think that we do have any, along with Big South, those are going to be the games at the bottom. So, but if we get things started, this is 663, 664. Rutgers is on the road against Penn State. Penn State is a favorite here of 3.5 to 4 points. It's on this game 148.5 to 149.5, and I'm going to be in on the under. I set my total 145. You've got just two very slow and controlled teams. Penn State is 280th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Rutgers is 284th, and for Penn State, this has been a ghastly defense this year. Really, both of these teams are. Penn State is right now in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis 334th. Rutgers is 275th, but which of these teams is really going to shine through an offense? You do have a Penn State team that has actually done a really good job in terms of taking care of the ball, in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Right now for Penn State, they rank in the top 50 in all of college basketball. Rutgers not the world's worst team at taking care of it. They rank about 104th, but here's the issue that you've got with this Rutgers team, and it's a big reason why I set my line at 5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Penn State. Where you want to hurt this Penn State team is down low. They've only got one player on the roster, and Ivan Jurcic, who's been able to give you over 4 rebounds per game. Rutgers is 343rd with their 2-point shooting percentage. You just look at things in terms of raw points scored on a per possession basis, and this Rutgers team is right now checking in a nice hearty 263rd in the country. And for Rutgers, you have been able to get some relatively good production out of Tyreke Francis in the backcourt, who's right now supplying you with 16.5 points, 2.5 assists per game. Darren Buchanan has come on as a little bit of a sharpshooter, 40% 3-point shooter with about 8 points per game. Dylan Grant throws in their 10.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, but your lone guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, Emmanuel Agbole, has been able to give you 4 points, 6.2 rebounds per game. That's a little bit of an issue. Meanwhile, for Penn State, you have to like the way that Freddie De Leon has been able up his scoring recently as he and Caden Mingo combined for 28.3 points per contest. Neither guy shoots so well from three in Penn State. As a collective, they're shooting about 32.6% from three-point. They've surprisingly been a top 80 team with regards to their two-point shooting percentage as they've been able to do a nice job down low. This is not necessarily the most efficient offense in the world either, but they have a much bigger edge in this department. 102nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And for Penn State, this is a team that if the pressure's on, they do shoot 75% of the free throw line. So relatively good at covering there. They keep teams off the free throw line. Just absolutely awful with their shooting percentages. They're outside the top 350 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. But at home, they have been able to generate some turnovers. It's not quite what it has been in the past, but Penn State right now 91st in the country overall in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. This does leap into the top 50 at home, and I do think that they're going to be able to generate some turnovers on Rutgers to be able to get the job done. And I think it's going to be a slower game. Semi-total 145. I'm in on the under. And with Penn State, made them a 5-point favorite, so I'm going to be one to lay the numbers. 665, 666. You've got VMI, and they are going to be on the road against Wofford. Wofford is a 14.5-point favorite. 154.5 to 155.5 is the total. I saw Wofford as a 19.5-point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number as this is a VMI team that has all sorts of issues right now. For VMI, their lying opponents to grab 39.6% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is 363rd in all of college basketball. VMI, 361st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home. And VMI is leading the nation in terms of percentage of field goal attempts that come from three-point range at 54.3%. And they're a nice hearty 303rd in terms of road three-point shooting percentage at 30.2%, and overall 317th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis on offense. The Ricky Bradley injury that happened early on during the season just really cut this team down as TJ Johnson has been doing his best for the team. He's right now giving you 18.5 points, 7 rebounds per game, and you do get about 6.5 points, 6 rebounds per game out of Jay Clark, but these are the lone two guys on the roster that give you over 4.2 rebounds per game. Tanya Yezaglu has been able to give you about 4.5 assists per game, and VMI honestly does an okay job taking care of the ball. Top 125 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but they're just not doing really the little things. And on defense, this has also been a team that's been getting absolutely blowtorched. For VMI, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 360th, and I'm not calling Wofford the Mona Lisa Vitos of defense. They're 312th in the country with this regard, but for Wofford, even though they've been without their top scorer, Kamari Holmes, they've had a lot of guys be able to step up in the interim. Niles Malchowski, 17 points, 2 steals per contest. He shoots about 34% from three. Wofford overall shoots 35% from three-point range. It shockingly takes a little bit of a dive when they're at home. I do think that this is a split that is going to iron out as they right now shoot 32.8% for three-point range at home, 36.4% away from home, and facing this VMI defense as well. Inside the top 275, his opponent's three-point shooting percentage should help, and he would be able to get good production on Brian Sumter. 7 points, 5 boards. He's been able to do a nice job on the inside, give you about a block and a half per contest. It's a Wofford team that keeps things very clean. Top 45 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Again, they're not necessarily the strongest team inside with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage. They're about 250th in the country, but they've also been able to do a really good job in terms of not allowing second and third chances. In terms of defensive rebound percentage, it's a Wofford team that does check in the top 150 in the country. While VMI is as bad as they are, I do think that Wofford is going to be able to do a nice job being able to control the boards, find some nice looks from three-point range, and take it to a VMI team that is just taking a lot of threes and not really hitting them. Semi-total at a 155.5. At 154.5, that's my back spy point on the over, mainly because VMI is just that inefficient on defense, so going to be one to lay the number, and I'm going to be in on that 154.5 to the over. 667, 668. You've got Furman playing us to East Tennessee. East Tennessee is a 1 to 1.5 point underdog. Total is 140 to 140.5. I made a total of a 136. I do like the under. Neither of these teams are going to be looking to push any tempo whatsoever for East Tennessee. Right now, in terms of total possessions per game, they're about 305th in the country. Furman is a little bit faster at 247th, but with this Furman team, they just have not necessarily been the world's most efficient offense at home. For Furman, when they're away from home, they are stunningly number 1 in the country in terms of their two-point shooting percentage. That falls outside the top 45 when they're at home. And Furman, in terms of just raw points scored on a per possession basis, 130th in the country. But again, that falls outside the top 155 when they're at home. The main reason has been they haven't turned the ball over a ton. For Furman, 289th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And typically when you think of ETSU, you think of a team that does a really good job with regards to rebounding, and they're still a top 35 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but where they've really been jacked up this year has been generating turnovers, 52nd in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Now, good news for Furman is that they got back Cooper Bowser, their second leading rebounder. He's been able to supply the team with about 13.5 points, 6 boards. He missed 10 games earlier in the season, and also Thomas, who's been your top 3-point shooter at 39.5%. He's been dealing with quite a bit of ailment as well. He has returned, and he scored a combined 39 points in the last 2 games. So this is a Furman team that is getting back to full force. Alex Wilkins has been that top scorer, 17 points, 5 assists per game, but really doesn't bomb it from 3, but able to get 9 rebounds, 10 points per game. Charles Johnson, and even though East Tennessee is a team that's well outside the top 225 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, they do a great job on the defensive glass. I do think that they're going to still do a nice job executing down low, as they themselves have been a top 55 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, and you've got a trio of guys, Brian Taylor, Cam Morris, Blake Barkley, all between 14.1 and 14.5 points per game. They all shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. It's an ETSU team that if it comes down to free throws, they shoot 75.5% at the free throw line, actually 76.5% at the free throw line. That's a top 50 mark. Furman is 67.3%. That is outside the top 325 in all of college basketball. ETSU is just doing the little things well. Top 75 team. There's fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They do a nice job being a top 65 defense. There's points a lot on a per possession basis. So I think that they slow things down. I think that ETSU executes late. So ETSU is a 2-point favorite. They get East Tennessee State on the money line and on the under. Set by total 136, 669, 670. Cleveland State is on the road against Youngstown State, and Youngstown State is a favorite here of 11.5 points. 156.5 is the total. Set a total of 160.5. I like the over. We got a Cleveland State team that is not going to be putting you under any sort of duress whatsoever. 314th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. That's big because what has been the real bugaboo for this Youngstown State offense has been the turnovers. 320th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Cleveland State has had their own issues. They're about 276th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and for Cleveland State, they've been a really good road 3-point shooting team. They are shooting about 38% for 3-point away from home. That's a top 20 mark in the country, and it's been a relatively solid offense. They overall are 123rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. That gets right around about 100th when they're away from home. Youngstown State, very similar, 124th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. In a game that should be relatively up and down, Cleveland State is 71st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Cleveland State is not executing on defense right now. They are currently 360th in terms of defensive rebound percentage, with opponents grabbing well above 36% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. They're overall 362nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home, but they do have Trey Beard on their side, who's been shooting over 40% from 3-point range. He's currently their number 2 scorer within that neighborhood about 13.5 points, 3.5 assists per game, and then you've had Deion Nasai be able to supply 15.5 points, throws in their 6 rebounds per game. Josiah Harris also gives you about 6.5 rebounds per game as well, but this is a unit that is just really giving it up in both aspects in terms of defense. They're outside the top 330 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. For Youngstown State, they should be able to control things down low. So you've got a true 7-footer in Emmanuel Zugaloff, who only gives you about 6 points, 2.7 rebounds per game, but throws in their multiple blocks. Chris Carroll is caroling all the way to give you 17.5 points, shoots 40% for 3-point range. Rich Rolfe has been a 37% 3-point shooter with Youngstown State. This is a group that has been a top 50 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, more of a country average team with their 3-point shooting, but I do think that with the just turnovers that Cleveland State does not generate on defense, that is going to lead to more clean possessions for this Youngstown State team to be able to get the job done in a high-scoring expose. Semi-total at a 160.5. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 12 with Youngstown State. Made them a 12.5 point favorite, 671, 672. Butler is going to be on the road against Georgetown. Georgetown, 6 to 6.5 point favorites, 144.5 to 145.5 is the total, and I said Georgetown is 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Butler. It's a Butler group that has certainly had their issues, to say the least, in terms of their overall just ability to guard. They've been outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Not a bad offense, 107th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And I will say for Georgetown, even though they're only about 122nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, that the just coming back of Vincent Iwuchukwu has been very big, as he missed about half the season. A true 7-footer who's done it all for the team. 11.5 points, 6 boards. He actually throws in there a block and a steal per contest as well. KJ Lewis, Malik Mack have been able to combine for about 29.5 points per game, but it's a Georgetown team that really doesn't shoot it well from 3. They're shooting about 33% from the outside, and they're not even good on the interior as well. For Georgetown, in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, this has been one of the lesser teams in all of college basketball, and that's where I think that this Butler team is going to be able to hold in there. Georgetown right now, 269th in the country with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, it is a Butler team that has Michael shy, giving you about 14.5 points, 11.5 rebounds per game for a Butler group that is overall 56th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound that goes into the top 45 when they're away from home. Georgetown, an okay team. They're more around 92nd in the country with this regard. And then you got Finley bizjacking teams from the outside. He's been the top scorer for Butler right now, give you 17 points per contest, shoots 36.5% from three. Butler has been a team that has been a little bit better with their three-point shooting defense rather than their two-point shooting percentage, as they're just a hair outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, from the outside, teams are only shooting more in that neighborhood, about 33.3% from three-point range. And with Butler, I do think that they're going to be able to do a nice job of having Jamie Kaiser be able to contribute, giving you about 9.5 points, a steal, 4.5 rebounds per game. It's a Georgetown team that's been very good at taking care of the ball. Top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. So the fact that Butler really doesn't generate a lot of turnovers, that doesn't really hurt them here. And it's a Butler team that's been very good at getting to the free throw line. Top 40 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. So do think that Butler is going to be able to remain lively. Georgetown is going to be looking to slow this game down in terms of total possessions per game. They are checking in more around about 220th in the country. Meanwhile, Butler has been a very fast team. In terms of total possessions per game, they are 43rd. I did set a total here of a 149.5, so going to be willing to take the points with Butler. And in this spot, I'm going to be in on the over as well. 673, 674. UAB is going to be on the road against Temple. Go Owls as Temple. The Owls are a 1.5 point favorite. 143.5 to 145.5 is the total. And I did set a total here of a 150, so I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the over. Now, this Temple team is playing a very slow pace. In terms of total possessions per game, 285th in the country. UAB much more of a blazer. They are currently 34th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Here's the one thing that both of these teams have done an absolutely masterful job of. Both of these teams take care of the ball. For Temple, in terms of total possessions per game, they are currently checking in 19th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers, and then UAB is second in the country. So you're going to be able to get clean possessions, even though it might be a little bit of a slowdown game. And UAB has been absolutely terrible with their three-point shooting. This is a team that doesn't have a lot of interest in taking three-point shots as well. They're a bottom 30 team in terms of percentage of their field goal attempts that come from three. They overall shoot 28% from three-point range. Temple is a team that's much more inclined to take threes. At home, they shoot 37.7% from three-point range. Now, away from home, that goes down to about 30% in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. But for the Temple team, they're not necessarily the most stout team on the inside. Now, they don't allow a ton of second and third chances for the Temple group. They're about 120th with regards to defense rebound percentage, which is not bad. UAB has been 36th, and in games played away from home, only 24.1% of opponents' missed shots result in an offensive rebound. Temple is not necessarily a team that's selling out to be able to grab those second and third chances either, but that said, for Temple, they do rank about 169th in the country with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage. It's a UAB team that has been quite a bit more stout at about 111th, and the big key for UAB is being able to guard the arc here, as overall for the season, UAB has been a little bit of an up-and-down three-point shooting defense, but they've been much better away from home. Away from home, they allow opponents to shoot just 30.7% from three-point range. That's a top 40 mark in the country. Meanwhile, that actually is a grand total of 125th when you combine home and road numbers at 32.9%. And for UAB, you've got Chance Westery on your side, who's been able to do a nice job, give this team 14.5 points per game. Not a guy that, again, is going to light you up from the outside, but a lot of guys by committee, they're able to hit the boards around him, as you've got Daniel Rivera giving you about 11.5 points, 7 rebounds per game. Kyron Lindsey, 6.5 rebounds, 11 points per game. Evan Chapman, 9 boards per contest. And then on the Temple side of things, you've got Darian Belfort Tough, who's been one of the main scorers for this team, as he shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, throws in there 18 points, 4.5 boards, and you've got Aiden Tobiason, who's been Mr. Versatile, 15 points, steal and a half per game, shoots about 34% from three-point range, but the injury early on during the season to A.J. Smith really hurt this team. It's a Temple team that in a pressure spot, they do shoot 74.8% at the free throw line, but again, this team not being stout on the inside and UAB looking to pound the ball inside, I think that that's going to win out in the spot. I do think that you get some late game fouling, and I do think that UAB, who shoots overall for the season only about 70% of the free throw line, still does enough to get the job done. I like UAB on the money line, made them a 2-point favorite, and like the over, semi-total 150, 675, 676. Bradley is on the road against Valparaiso, and Valparaiso finds themselves as a home underdog of 2.5 points, 142.5 to 143.5 is the total. Set my line at 2. I'm going to be willing to take anything of 2.5 plus with Valparaiso. Now, Valparaiso is an awful shooting team. They're outside the top 300 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. They're a little bit better from 3-point range, but not a ton better. But they do go up against a Bradley team that has been giving teams a lot of good looks from 3-point range. This is a Bradley team that's been selling out for turnovers. They're a top 50 team in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. But for Bradley, in games played away from home, they allow opponents to shoot 36.1% from 3-point 3-point range, as well outside the top 250 in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, it is a Valparaiso team that they've been shooting about 34.5% from 3-point range at home. Not amazing, but you know what? It's passable. Meanwhile, for this Bradley group, they're shooting about 38.1% from 3-point range away from home. But I do think that Valparaiso is going to do a nice job in terms of staying within themselves and not allowing them good looks from 3-point range, because for what Valparaiso has really lacked with regards to their overall shooting, they're doing the little things well. Valparaiso, 52nd in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and Valparaiso has been a pretty solid team in terms of taking care of the ball as well. They're a top 110 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, Bradley probably has the most versatile player out there on the floor, and Jaquan Johnson, 17 points, 4 boards, 3.5 assists, shoots 40% from 3. Alex Ibaguirre, 43% 3-point shooter, 12 points per contest, but it is also a Bradley team that has been having a tough time on the glass. They're outside the top 200 with regards to overall rebound percentage, and they're just not executing on the inside. They're well outside the top 275 in terms of their 2-point shooting percentages, despite the fact that Ahmet Janovic is a guy that stands right around about 7'2", 7 points. He gives you about a block and a half, 5.5 rebounds per game. But I think the Valparaiso, they're going to be able to hold in there, because Owen Dees gives all D's of these 14 points and 40.5% 3-point shooting to the team. It's a Valparaiso team that's been above country average in terms of putting you on the free throw line. They're just outside of country average, 70.5% at the charity stripe. And again, they themselves have been really bad with regards to their interior offense. But this is a group that has been able to do a very nice job with having Rakeem Chaney along with Brody Whitaker do a better job in the backcourt. They're combining for about 18 points per game between the two of them. They're shooting 38.5% from 3. They combine for about 2 steals per game. So the backcourt play has been getting better and better as the season goes along. It's a team that's really doing the little things well. And if you look at conference play and conference play only, for Valparaiso, they've actually been 3rd in the conference in terms of offensive rebounds per game and 3rd in 3-point shooting. I think that that's going to be able to keep them lively in this game, especially with them taking care of the ball against a Bradley team that is very much looking to win that turnover battle. Do think that it's going to be a little bit of a lower possession game. It's a Bradley team that's been looking to push a little bit more tempo this year. We're on 24th in terms of total possessions per game. Valparaiso is 267th, and neither of these teams executing inside, I think, cost you the over. So made a total of a 140, so I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under, and I'm willing to take 2.5 plus here with Valpo, 677, 678. Clemson is on the road against Wake Forest. Wake Forest, home underdogs of 3 to 3.5 points, 138.5 to 139 is the total, and I'm going to be in on the over. I set my total at a 141.5, mainly because Wake Forest has just been a turnstile down low. They're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and it's not a Clemson team that's going to go out there and just go hog wild from 3-point range. Clemson, they do shoot about 34.8% from 3-point range away from home. That hovers right around about the top 100 in all of college basketball, but they're quite a bit better on the inside. They're about 66th in the country in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. You've got a Wake Forest team that they themselves have been a pretty solid team on offense. They're a top 100 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're about 103rd in all of college basketball at home. That does ascend just inside the top 100, so they've been able to do an okay job with that regard. And you do have a pair of guys that are really like in Juke Harris, who's been your main scorer. He's giving you over 20 points per contest from 3-point range. He's right now launching it at about 35.5%, and then Nate Messi, who's been your number 4 scorer, 10.5 points. He shoots about 39% from 3-point range, but he's been dealing with a little bit of injury, and he's probably going to be out of the fold, so I had to take that into account, and that did set me over the top on Clemson, made them 3.5 point favorites, so I'd be willing to lay up to 3 with them, because now you're relying a little bit more on Trayvon Spillers, along with Miles Coleman, who combined for about 23 points per game, both shoot about 35% from 3-point range, but again, this is a team that's very weak on the inside, and right now for Wake Forest, what has been the big forte of this team has been generating turnovers. So you take a look at this team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They rank 40th in all of college basketball, but you've got a Clemson group that, despite the fact that you don't necessarily have that one main point guard and it's a whole is greater than the sum of its parts approach, you've got essentially 8 different guys that are healthy right now that give you between 5.5 and 12.5 points per game. They still clock in 58th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They've been able to do a really good job down low as well, sort of by committee, with having your top guy, RJ Godfrey, give you 11.5 points, 5 rebounds per game. Carter Welling throws in there 5.5 boards, 10.5 points per game. You have Nick Davidson give you 4 boards. Dylan Hunter gives you 4 boards. So all these guys as a collective are just doing a really nice job in tandem, and in a pressure spot. Clemson, country average team, they shoot about 72.5% at the free throw line, but with this team being a top 55 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and Wake Forest really giving it up on the inside, I do think that Clemson gets the job done. Do think that it will be close enough for those late fouls, and Wake Forest is a pretty up-tempo team. Clemson outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. Wake Forest is 48, so like the over, so I told 141.5, and with Clemson willing to lay up to 3 with them. 679, 680. Richmond is on the road against Davidson. Davidson is a 5.5 to a 6-point favorite. 141 after 142 is the total, and set a total of 141. I like the under, mainly because I just don't know if you're going to get enough possessions for the over. You've got a Davidson team that is very much looking to play slowly. In terms of total possessions per game, this team is checking in well outside the top 300 in all of college basketball, so it's been very much a slog for them. Meanwhile, you've got a bunch that has been able to do a relatively solid job in terms of playing mid-tempo in Richmond. Richmond about 182nd in the country, and this is a Richmond team that has been able to really light it up from three-point range. Richmond has been pretty solid in terms of taking care of the ball, about 65th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They, from three-point range, shoot 37.4%, which interestingly goes down to 34.9% at home, 41% away from Davidson. They're built around their three-point shooting as they shoot 39% from three-point range away from home. That goes down to 36% at home. So I do think that those home and road splits actually help out Richmond with them being so good from the outside away from home. So I'm going to be willing to take a shot here on Richmond. I set them as a 5-point dog, and Richmond is another one of those teams where you don't necessarily have that one go-to scorer right now. AJ Lopez has been your top scorer with about 12.5 points, shoots 40% from three-point range, but you just look up and down the boulevard at this team, you've got 8 different guys that give you at least 5.5 points per game. Now, you do have main rebounder Michael Walls, about 8 points, 7 rebounds per game, and they go up against a Davidson team that doesn't have a single guy on the roster. It gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game. Not the world's worst defensive rebound team, but they do not give themselves any sort of second and third chances, and they've been right around about 200th in the country with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Pretty solid in terms of guarding the arc. Top 150 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Robert Blums has been your main scorer with about 11.5 points, shoots 42.5% from 3. Parker Fredrickson, 10.5 points. He shoots 44% from the outside, and this has been a Richmond team that has been a little bit more up-down all around in terms of their opponents' 3-point shooting percentages. Right now for Richmond, they're allowing teams to shoot from 3-point range right around about 32.6%, which that's the top 110 mark in all of college basketball. Davidson 117th, so both of these teams are on equal footing. But again, Davidson at home allows teams to shoot 35.8% for 3 compared to 29.5% away from home. I do think that this game is going to be close enough for Lake Cane Fellows, and for Davidson, that's not a good thing. They shoot 67.9% at the free throw line. I think that Richmond, with their good outside shooting away from home, helps them hold in there. So I set a total of 141 here at the 142. I'm in on the under, and we'll take 5.5 plus here with Richmond. 681, 682. Northern Iowa's on the road against Indiana State. Indiana State home underdogs, 4 to 4.5 points total on this game, 135 to 135.5, and for Northern Iowa, I did set them as a 6-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. This Northern Iowa team just does not allow you to get good looks from 3-point range. They are Mambo number 5 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage at 28%, and Northern Iowa is making games a slog, 360th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Indiana State is looking to push them tempo, 101st in terms of total possessions per game. They have been outside the top 290 in terms of all security. Where the team has really been able to shine is on the inside. It's an Indiana State team that is a top 55 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, but their offense has been far less efficient when they've been at home rather than away from home. Overall, Indiana State is about 273rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but if you look solely at their home games, that falls outside the top 335. They're actually scoring about 5.2 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than away from home. Northern Iowa not knocking your socks off either on offense. They're on 22nd in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, falls outside the top 230 when they're away from home. But for Northern Iowa, this is a team that's solid in terms of generating turnovers. I'm not going to call them amazing, but they've been a top 175 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They actually shoot a little bit better from 3-point range away from home rather than at home. And then you've got Trey Campbell, Leon Bond leading the backcourt, combined for about 25.5 points per game. Bond is your top 3-point shooter at about 40%. Will Hornseth does shoot 43% for 3, but he attempts less than a half a 3 per game. And then Ben Schwieger, 9.5 points, 5 rebounds per game for Northern Iowa. They are not going to give themselves any sort of second and third chances. They are outside the top 330 in all of college basketball in terms of percentage of their missed shots. They result in an offensive rebound. They won't let you get second and third chances. So in games played away from home, teams grab 23.7% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is either 8th or 9th, depending upon when you look in the country. And then for Indiana State, you do have Ian Scott, who great Scott has been able to do a nice job leading the way with about 13.5 points, 6.5 boards from 3-point shoots, 37% from the outside. Camp Wagner has been giving you about 11.5 points per game. But again, again, this team losing the turnover battles. Indiana State is also outside the top 260 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis is a big concern. And I do think that even though Northern Iowa not as good with their interior defense as they are on the outside, they're still a top 150 team with regards to both their 2-point shooting percentage and opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. I think that gets the job done in a slog. So by total at a 130. So in on the under, and I'm going to lay up to 5.5 here with Northern Iowa, 683, 684. St. Joe's, they hope to not be average Joes on the road against St. Bonaventure, and the Bonnies find themselves as 4.5-point favorites. 145.5 to 146.5 is the total. I made a total of a 143.5. I do like the under. It's a St. Joe's team that has overall been relatively rough with their offense in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They are well outside the top 200 there, and they're a mid-tempo team. They're about 193rd in terms of total possessions per game. Bonaventure now pushing a fast tempo at 244th, but that's actually faster than what they have been in the past. And Bonaventure has been a top 100 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. St. Joe's, they're 261st, but St. Joe's has been a little bit better with their 3-point shooting recently. It's not saying much because they were a bottom 15 team in non-conference play with their 3-point shooting. They're still only shooting 30.4% per three, but in conference play, that's gone up to 33.7%, and this has been a very good interior defense. This team is in the top 25 in terms of shot blocks per game, with Justice Ajabor being able to lead that charge as he's been supplying the team with 5 points, 5 boards, 2.3 blocks per contest, and then you've been able to get good production out of someone like a Desar Haskins, 11 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. They've been without Deuce Jones ever since the beginning of conference play, but Jane Glover in the interim has stepped up with about 15.5 points, 4.5 boards. He shoots 37% from 3-point range, and on the flip side of things for St. Bonaventure, I don't know what has happened, but this defense has just went straight down the toilet bowl. Typically, this is a really good team defensively, but they are giving up a lot of second and third chances at home. They're outside the top 175 in terms of defensive rebound percentage at home. This is despite the fact that Frank Mitchell has been able to give you 14 plus points, 9 plus rebounds per game, and they've been far less efficient when they've been at home rather than away from home with their defense. As a matter of fact, they are giving up now 5.7 points more per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than away from home. They're overall 245th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but that goes into the bottom 35 when they're at home. Now, for St. Bonaventure, you've been able to have Daryl Simmons step up in a big way, 16 points, about 3 assists per contest. Kane Charles has been able to give you 13 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, and this is a Bonaventure team that has been able to shoot it really well from 3-point range. Overall for the season, they're shooting about 36.8% from 3-point range. That is a top 50 mark in all of college basketball, but for St. Joe's, even though they're a much better interior defense rather than an exterior defense, they haven't been too bad in terms of being able to guard the arc as well. With the St. Joe's team, they're allowing teams to shoot about 32.8% per three. That's a top 125 mark in all of college basketball. It's a Bonaventure team that has been country average with their 2-point shooting percentage, or outside the top 225 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and they're getting blasted from the outside. But again, St. Joe's still not doing a great job with their 3-point shooting. So circumstance where I made my total of 143.5. I'm going to be in on the under. So my line at 5.5. So right now, with this being 4.5, I do think that Bonaventure starts to iron out a little bit more with regards to defense, and I just don't think that St. Joe's takes advantage of the bad 3-point shooting enough to be able to stay within this number. So going to be willing to lay up to 5 with the Bonnies, and I'm going to be in on the under as well. 685, 686. Arkansas is on the road against Alabama. Alabama is a 3.5 to a 4.5 point favorite total on this game. 181.5, and I'm seeing as high as a 183.5 out there as well, and I'm in on the under. I set my total at a 175.5. I certainly don't think that this is going to be a slog, as Alabama's 4th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and then you've got an Arkansas team that is clocking in 44th, but here's the one thing that Arkansas has been able to do a really good job of this year. They're actually guarding the 3-point line. The Arkansas defense overall is not great in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They check in 126, but they're 40th in the country. An opponent's 3-point shooting percentage at 30.9% really doesn't take too much of a drop-off away from home, and we all know what Alabama's looking to do. They're looking to launch from 3. 58.2% of Alabama field goal attempts come from 3-point range in their home games as numero uno in all of college basketball, and obviously, you've got some star-side scorers for the team in Holloway, 17 points per game on 44% 3-point shooting. LeBaron Filan shoots about 40% from 3, throws in there 21.5 points, 5 assists per game. Alabama, despite the fact that they're so fast, they don't really turn the ball over. Top 30 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Obviously, not a team that's going to put you under any duress whatsoever on defense. Alabama right now, in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis on defense, 363rd in the country. Arkansas, not necessarily the Mona Lisa offensive vetoes themselves, but they're more around about 214th, and in games played away from home, that does climb into the top 185. But for Alabama, what are you going to be able to do down low now that you've been dealing with a few injuries? Amari Allen has been in and out of the lineup, should be good to go in this one. He's looked relatively solid in the last few games, but we know that they tried to bring in Charles Bediako to help out with that because they were dealing with Taylor Bowen, also dealing with a few ailments as well. But that said, on the flip side for Arkansas, I do think that Trevon Brazile is going to be able to do a nice job matching up down low. Love his versatility with about 13 points, 7 boards at about 6 to 9, 6 to 10, shoots 36% from 3, and then those two freshmen, Darius Acuff, Malik Thomas, combining for 36 points per game. Acuff, 6 assists, shoots 43% from 3, and Arkansas right there with Alabama in terms of ball security. As a matter of fact, they're a top 10 team in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They are vulnerable on the inside. Arkansas about 200th in the country with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but they're also a top 40 team with their own two-point shooting percentage. They're a little bit more well-rounded with that regard. Now they're getting dump trucked down the glass. They're allowing a lot of second and third chances on the boards, but I do think that Malik Ewan, who's giving you a block, 5 rebounds per game, holds his own. And with the way that Arkansas guards the three-point line, I think that keeps them lively in this game and helps you out to the under. Somebody told 175.5. I like the under and the points here with Arkansas made them a 1.5 point dog, 687, 688. Creighton is going to be on the road against Connecticut. UConn is a 16.5 point favorite. So on this game is 142.5. UConn has only covered about a third of their games this year, and I think that this is once again a hair too high. I set my line at 15.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points. It's not that UConn is playing bad basketball by any stretch of the imagination, but there have just been a lot of circumstances this year where they've been overvalued by a point or two, and I think that this is another one of these spots. As for UConn, solo ball has been rock solid, 14.5 points per game, and who knows what this team is going to be if he can get back to the 40% three-point shooting of a season ago. He's only shooting about 31% from 3, and for UConn, the three-point shooting has really come alive. They're up to about 36.8% three-point shooting. That's a top 45 mark in the country in conference play only 38.3% from three-point range, and UConn has been really good with regards to both opponents' two-point and three-point shooting percentage. They're in the top 20 in both regards. Not a team that's going to put you under a ton of duress, about 83rd in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and both teams should be able to get clean possessions. Creighton is 335th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. I did set my total here at a 142.5. I was seeing this more around about a 142, 141.5. It's been climbing upwards, so 142 or less is going to be my buy point on the over, mainly because it is a Creighton team that has been rather rough with regards to their defense. As we know, this is a UConn team that's a top 25 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They do their job, and then with this Creighton bunch, it has not been necessarily so great for them, as right now they're checking in 239th in the country. There's points allowed on a per possession basis, but that does go into the top 200 away from home. And for Creighton, it's been a little bit of a mix and match for them all season long because they don't necessarily have that go-to scorer like they've had in the past, but I do think that they're going to be able to do just enough to hold in there because you've been able to have Josh Hicks step up, give you about 12 points, 2.5 assists per game. He's not necessarily shot at the world's greatest from three-point range, but also getting back Allison Schwartz, who was dealing with a little bit of ailment towards the back half of January into early February, is big because in conference play, only 15 points per game, shoots 41.5% from 3. He has been sort of taking over that alpha dog role. Additionally, you've been able to get right around about 5 or so rebounds per game out of Jason Green, who's been chipping in there 10.5 points per game. It's a Creighton team that also does a great job in terms of not allowing you to the free throw line. Top 25 team in terms of fewest free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. Creighton and UConn both playing at a relatively controlled pace. 234th in the country in terms of total possessions per game for Creighton. UConn more around about 273rd, but I do think that you're going to be able to get some good execution here on offense. I think that Creighton is going to be able to do an okay job in terms of taking care of the ball, and this is a Creighton team that has been coming alive a little bit more with their three-point shooting in conference play at about 36%. So I made a line here of a 15.5 with Jarris Reed. He should be able to control things down low for UConn. He's giving you 8+ rebounds per game. Love what Alex Caravan is able to do. 13.5 points, 5.5 boards. He shoots 40+% from 3, and then Silas Emery has been shooting 46% from 3. I think those guys do just enough to get you the over. So I'm in on a over at a 142 or less, and I'm going to be willing to take 15+ with Creighton, 689, 690. James Madison is on the road against Coastal Carolina. Our nation's fourth president is a very slim underdog, as James Madison right now is a underdog of about 1.5 to 2.5 points. So on this game between 139 to a 140. Even seeing some ones out there, and I'm willing to lay with Coastal Carolina. I did set them as a 4.5 point favorite. Now this Coastal Carolina team is not going to put you under any sort of duress whatsoever, but neither of these teams are. Both of these teams are outside the top 345 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but Coastal Carolina has been able to do a good job in terms of their shooting percentage defense. In terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, they are 93rd in all of college basketball, and they're really supreme on the inside. They are 9th in the country in terms terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and typically Preston Spradlin coach teams going all the way back to Morehead State, they're typically a little bit better with regards to that defense, and they're not bad on the inside. They're 77th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. With regards to the outside, they're giving it up a little bit more, 169th in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but they're well outside the top 200 right now in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And let's say that James Madison gets into a little bit of pressure spot, they shoot just 69.8% at the free throw line. That is outside the top 250 in all of college basketball. Backcourt play is not bad. Bradley Douglas, Cliff Davis, they've been able to combine for about 26.5 points per game, and you've got Davis shooting 38% from 3. Justin McBride, he's a little bit of a do-it-all guy, about a 17 point per game clip, 41% 3-point shooting, leads the way with 6 rebounds per game. Eddie Ricks gives you 6 rebounds per game, so they've been able to do a nice job there. But that said, this is also a bunch that just has not been able to do the world's greatest job in terms of keeping you off the free throw line either. This is a team that is fouling a ton, despite the fact that they're not generating any sort of turnovers, which I find to be very intriguing. Coastal Carolina, not an amazing free throw shooting team, but not terrible, 72.5%. That's country average. And for this Coastal Carolina team, they're not going to grab for themselves a lot of second and third chances well outside the top 225 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and James Madison hasn't done a great job there either. But for this Coastal Carolina team, they're also a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. James Madison is more around 158th, and for Coastal Carolina, you've really got a big three in terms of your scoring, as Reshi Jones, 15 points, 3 assists, shoots 39.5% per 3. AJ Dantzler, 15.5 points, 5.5 boards, he shoots 40% per 3. And Joshua Beadle doesn't shoot it well from 3, but 3 assists, 17 points per game. Coastal Carolina has been a top 150 team in terms of taking care of the ball themselves. I think that that's going to be enough to get the job done against the James Madison team that's just not playing the same level of defense you expect under Preston Spradlin. Do you think that this is going to be a rather controlled game? Coastal Carolina, more of a mid-tempo team. James Madison, 257th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I do think they get enough efficiency with the clean possessions for the over, so I told 142.5, like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 4 here with Coastal Carolina. 691, 692, Delaware is going to be playing us to Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky is a favorite here of 3.5 points. So this game is 139.5. Now, Western Kentucky is getting much healthier. Tegan Moore played in the previous game, and it's a Delaware team that's going to be looking to make things just a slog. 355th in terms of total possessions per game. I set Delaware as a 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to take a shot on them on the money line. Delaware, not the world's worst team with regards to defensive rebound percentage. In games played at home, they're allowing opponents to grab only about 25.9% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That's actually a top 175 mark in the country, and this is a Delaware team that has been able to do a surprisingly decent job of holding up on the inside. They're a top 100 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Western Kentucky, their forte is supposed to be on the inside, and to their credit, in games played away from home, they've actually been very good with their interior defense. They've been a top 50 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but this is a Delaware team that they thrive with their 3-point shooting, and Western Kentucky right now allows teams to shoot 35% per 3-point range. That is 233rd in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you've got a Delaware group that right now, with regards to their own 3-point shooting percentage, they've been lighting it up at 36.8%. That is 38th in all of college basketball. Christian Bliss has given you 15.5 points, 5.5 boards. He shoots it well from 3. Justin Fernandez has been able to shoot 40+% from 3. He's flying the team with about 15.8 points per game. McComb Embry, 11.5 points, 7 rebounds per game. So for Delaware, it's not necessarily the flashiest team in the world, and they are certainly losing the turnover battle. They're outside the top 230 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. On offense, on defense, they're a bottom 30 team in terms of generating turnovers themselves, but I think that they can get the job done against a Western Kentucky team that, while you do have back your top scorer in Tegan Moore, who all season long has been able to give you about 18 points, 6 boards, 2.5 assists per game, it's a Western Kentucky team that doesn't light you up from 3. They're shooting only about 32.5% from 3. And here's a real issue that you've got for Western Kentucky. This Western Kentucky team is absolutely terrible with their interior offense. They're 357th in the country in their 2-point shooting percentage. As you've got Grant Newell's been able to give you 12 points per game. Now Armello Boone has been dealing with an injury, 11.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Your leading rebounder from the beginning part of the season, Brandon Selbungwe, was giving you about 7 rebounds per game. He's been injured as well. That leaves Moore as a lone guy in the roster that gives you over 4.3 rebounds per game. Now, it is a Western Kentucky team that shoots 75.5% the free throw line. That is a top 75 mark in the country, and they're one of the best teams at getting to the free throw line in the country. Western Kentucky is going to look to crank up the tempo. Still a top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game, but with this Delaware team shooting it from 3-point range the way that they do, in a little bit of pressure spot, Delaware at the free throw line, they're shooting about 77% of the free throw line. I think that they get the job done here. So, made Delaware the 1.5 point favorite. I like them on the money line, and with this total being mine a 141.5, so I'm also in on the over. 693, 694. Northern Kentucky is going to be playing us to Fort Wayne. Fort Wayne is a underdog of 6 to 6.5 points. 150 to 150.5 is the total line. For Fort Wayne, I made them a underdog of 7.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Northern Kentucky has been able to do a very nice job in terms of cranking things up a little bit more more, 84th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and both of these teams have similar objectives. Both of these teams are very much good to be looking to win the turnover battle in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Both of these teams have been two of the better mid-majors out there, with Northern Kentucky 53rd, and honestly, they're a little bit better at generating turnovers when they're away from home. Fort Wayne 45th in the country, and Fort Wayne does do the better job in terms of taking care of the ball. They're a top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and they're a solid three-point shooting team. They shoot 34.3% overall. That does go down to 31.4% away from home. Meanwhile, for Northern Kentucky, they shoot about 34.5% from three-point range at home, but their real edge is on the inside, as this Fort Wayne team is right now dead last in the country in terms of rebound percentage, and Northern Kentucky has been a top 55 team with regards to their two-point shooting percentage, with having a guy in LJ Wells do a very Wells job in terms of giving you about 7.5 to 8 rebounds per game. He's been able to splash in there about 13.5 points per game. Donovan Ode, 18.5 points. He shoots only about 30% per three, but gets other guys involved with his 2 steals, 2 assists per contest. And Gretzinger, 36% three-point shooter, 16.5 points per game. Khalil Robinson shoots 40% from the outside, and this is a Purdue Fort Wayne team that they very much more gamble for turnovers than Northern Kentucky. Now, Northern Kentucky is also outside the top 275 with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Fort Wayne is outside the top 3 with regards to both opponents' two-point and three-point shooting percentage. For Fort Wayne, you've been able to have a nice trio on the backcourt. Corey Hadnot being the main guy, 3 assists, 20.5 points per contest, shoots 34% per three, and then DeAndre 3000, Craig, Mikal Stevenson combined for about 20.5 points per game. They combined to shoot 37% from three-point range and combined about 6 assists per contest, but with this team being so bad on the inside, and if they get fouled, they only shoot about 71.5% of the free throw line. That should allow Northern Kentucky to be able to get the job done in this spot, and with both of these teams giving up the percentages that they do, I think they get a nice scoring expose. Here's my total, 157.5. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 7 here with Northern Kentucky. 685, 696. Ole Miss is going to be on the road against Texas A&M, and A&M is a pretty good size favorite here. You're going to be laying 9.5 to 10.5 with them. 154.5 to 155 is the total. I'm going to take the points here with Ole Miss. I set them as an 8.5 point underdog. Now, this is a Texas A&M team that has been supreme in terms of generating turnovers. Top 35 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and this Ole Miss team is not a vintage Chris Beard team. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They still do one thing really well. That's take care of the ball. 21st in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, you also have a Texas A&M team that has really been able to light it up from three-point range right now. For Texas A&M, they are shooting at a clip of 37% from three-point range at home. That goes up to about 38.5% from three-point range when they are at home. And this Ole Miss team is not the same three-point shooting team that they have been in the past. In games played away from home, they're shooting only about 31.3% from three-point range, but I do think that they can hold in this game, because you do have a Texas A&M team that in their home games, their live teams shoot over 35.5% per three. They've legitimately been outside the top 250 there. Meanwhile, away from home, teams shoot less than 30% from three-point range against them, so riddle me that. Rashawn Agee is going to be the best rebounder in this game. 13.5 points, right around about 9 rebounds per game. He's the one guy on the roster that gives you over 3 rebounds per game, by the way, for Texas A&M. So an Ole Miss team that really doesn't have a lot down low right now. Main guy is Malik Diaz, who's been able to give you about 5.5 or so rebounds per game. They're not going to be completely bludgeoned on the glass. Now, obviously, it's an A&M team that has been much more explosive in terms of their offense, but they are outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage as well. You need a little bit more out of Zach Clements and some of those guys, so you've had Pops Isaacs really be able to step up here in conference play only. Shoots 39% per three with about 11 points per game off the bench. Rylan Griffin has been shooting 43% from three-point here in SEC play, and it really has been coming together for Bucky McMillan's team, unlike what we have seen for Ole Miss. But for Ole Miss, you still have a guy in A.J. Storr, who I know that he's been a globetrotter with how many schools he's played for, but right now he's supplying the team with 14.5 points, shoots 39% from three-point range. Dio, I mentioned before, is giving you about 13 points per game. Kezigifa has been able to give you some nice contributions with about 6.5 points, shoots 38% from three-point range, and it is an Ole Miss group that is about country average with regards to both opponents' two-point and three-point shooting percentage. They've had a tough time being able to execute down low as well. Right now, they're outside the top 250 with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage. Neither of these teams do much in way of being able to give you second and third chances, but with this being an Ole Miss team that has been able to do a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball, for Ole Miss, they're right now allowing teams to shoot about 34.5% for three-point away from them. I think that that's just enough for them to hold in this game, so I'm going to take the points with Ole Miss, set them as an 8.5 point underdog, and with Ole Miss, they're going to be looking to slow this game down in terms of total possessions per game. They check in 225th. Texas A&M, top 40 team with regards to total possessions per game, did set a total here of a 154.5, so So 155, that does become my buy point on the under. 697, 698, Wichita State is going to be on the road against East Carolina. East Carolina is a home underdog of 6.5 points, 144 to 144.5 is the total. Set a line of a 6.5. I'm right now seeing a few sevens. 7 does become my buy point on East Carolina. East Carolina has been absolutely dreadful with their three-point shooting offense and defense, but they've actually been able to get a little bit of a spark recently as Dimitri Gardner, who was missing for about 13 games earlier this season, is actually shooting 50% for three. He's the lone guy on the roster shooting above 30% for three, but you're at the very least getting a little bit of something there, and this is still a respectable rebounding team. Now, East Carolina, they do a solid job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances, and they're giving up a lot of second and third chances themselves. In terms of defensive rebound percentage, this East Carolina team is ranked first in all of college basketball. Wichita State, much better there. They were about 59th in the country, and Wichita State, in games played away from home, they're a top 5 team in terms of percentage of their own missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound, but I think that this is going to be a little bit more of a slogged up game with Wichita State. They're about 200th in the country. In terms of total possessions per game, you got an East Carolina team that has been about a mid-tempo team, 137th in the country. In terms of total possessions per game in East Carolina, well outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but I think that Jordan Riley keeps them lively. 23 points, 5.5 boards. He's been solid. Giovanni Amaruju is able to give you 9.5 or so rebounds per game as well. Now, East Carolina has been really bad with regards to their two-point shooting percentage as well. Not only do they shoot 28% per three, but they're also outside the top 3 with regards to their opponent's two-point shooting percentage as well. But it's not a Wichita State team that's going to put you under too much stress. And with East Carolina having about 12 turnovers per game, that's going to be able to help them out quite greatly. You got a Wichita State team that's been about a country average team, shooting 34.5% per three. Keenan Giles has been that main man, shooting about 38.5% per three-point, main scorer with 15-plus points per contest. With Wichita State, shoot about 34.5% from three-point away from home. Caron Boyd shoots 35% with about 11.6 rebounds per game. And then the Berg and Wilberg, 8.5 points, right around about 8.2 rebounds per game. But let's say they need Wichita State to cover at the free throw line. 67.5% is what they shoot at the free throw line. That is a little bit of an issue. Wichita State, they're the much better team in terms of taking care of the ball, top 85 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. But I do think that East Carolina being able to get a shot in the arm from Gardner from the outside helps them remain lively in a game that I think is going to be relatively low scoring. With East Carolina, they've been improving a little bit on the defensive side things. So semi-total 138.5. I like the under and anything of 7+ here with East Carolina. 699, 700 on the card. UNC Greensboro is going to be on the road against Western Carolina. Western Carolina does find themselves as a home favorite here of 5 to 5.5 points. 155.5 to 156.5 is the total. Made my line 5.5, so I'm going to be willing to lay 5 and not a hair more with this Western Carolina team. Western Carolina overall for the season is still an up-tempo team, 123rd in terms of total possessions per game, but in conference play, they've really slowed themselves down. Meanwhile, Greensboro is much faster than they have been in the past. They're about 176th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Here's the undoing for Greensboro, though. They're just really bad on the glass. They're 228th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage, in terms of percentage of their own missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, 273rd, and Western Carolina has been very good in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. At home, they grab 36% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That is a top 40 mark in the country, and Western Carolina's bugaboo all season long was turnovers, but for one, they've been able to do a much better job here in conference play in terms of not turning the ball over. In SoCon conference play, they're right now only turning the ball over about 9.5 times per game in Greensboro. Overall, just outside the top 325 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And for Western Carolina, here in conference play only, shooting about 35.5% from three. You've gotten a lot recently. Julian Sawarmo in the backcourt, 12 points, shoots 40% from three. Cord Stansberry and Marcus Skell are your top two scorers. They combine for 26.8 points per game between the two of them, about 8 boards. And Cord Stansberry gives you a pair of assists per contest. Now he shoots above 30% from three, but Tijani Dumasi, who comes over from Southern, 35% three-point shooter. He's been rock solid. And for Western Carolina, I have to have a little bit of pause about the fact that this team only shoots about 70% the free throw line. That's outside the top 250 in the country. And Greensboro's actually covered each of their last 4 games, and they've got 4 outright wins. They're playing much better here recently. Justin Neely is your main man, 17 points and 11.9 rebounds per game. That rebounds per game mark is a top 10 mark in the country, but you only have 2 other guys on the roster that average more than 2.2 rebounds per game, so that has been a little bit of an issue. You've had Lillian Barvell be able to shoot 54% for 3 with about 10 points per game, so he's been rock solid there, but it's also a group that is outside the top 290 with regards to opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Greensboro actually a relatively good 3-point shooting team. They're shooting 36% as a collective, and games played away from home, that really doesn't take any sort of a drop-off either. For Greensboro, away from home, they've still been able to shoot above 33.5% from the outside. This is a Western Carolina team that's outside the top 330 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but do you think that in the end, with Western Carolina having such a big edge on the glass, they do find a way to get the job done? This has become a little bit of a slower team, so Did set my total at a 155.5 right now, seeing some 156.5s, 155.5s. So 156 or higher, going to be in on the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 5 here with Western Carolina. 7-1, 7-2, Dayton is on the road against George Mason. George Mason is a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite. So on this game, it is 136.5 to 137.5. I made George Mason the 6-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Dayton's forte has been generating turnovers this year. They're a top 5 team in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. While the offense just has not been great. They're outside the top 170 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. We're really not executing on the inside. In games played away from them, they're outside the top 250 with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. They're overall 244th with their 3-point shooting percentage at 32.8%. And this has become a team that gambles a little bit for turnovers. Now, Dayton's still a relatively solid defensive team. They're 52nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're giving up 12 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. George Mason overall 69th, very nice in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That does go into the top 60 when they're at home, and George Mason neither here nor there in terms of taking care of the ball, about 122nd in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. But if they don't have a turnover, Dayton, they are really bad in terms of guarding the 3-point line. In games played away from home, teams are shooting 38.6% from 3-point range. That is a bottom 40 mark in the country. Now, for Dayton, you've been able to have Javon Bennett along to Sean Montgomery be able to combine for about 30.5 points per game. And Montgomery shoots 36.5% from 3-point. Keontae Jones has been able to shoot 38.5% from 3, about 8.5 points per game. And with Jones, he gives you 5.5 rebounds per game. Emil Latang is a 7-footer that's able to pop some threes, 5.5 boards, 11 points per game. But these are the lone two guys that give you over 4.3 rebounds per game. Jordan Durcock was dealing with injury. They've gotten him back. He gives you a steal, 9 points, some good versatility there. But for Dayton, they're also outside the top 265 with regards to percentage of their missed shots. They result in an offensive rebound. George Mason, not necessarily a supreme team in terms of giving themselves second and third chances, but they've been able to do a pretty solid job on the defensive glass in terms of not allowing those second chances with George Mason, top 100 team with regards to defensive rebound percentage. Dayton, not that. They're about 163rd. And for George Mason, I like the two guys that you've got in the backcourt in Jahari Long along Corey Mincy. Mincy leads the way with 15 points on 40% 3-point shooting. Long, 36% 3-point shooter, 11.5 points. These two guys combine for about 7 assists per game. Again, with George Mason, they don't turn the ball over a ton, and George Mason looked to play very slow and control, while Dayton is a little bit of a faster team. Dayton right now is about 129th in terms of total possessions per game. With old George right now, they are 338th in all of college basketball. Let's say that you put yourself in a pressure spot. George Mason, country average team, they shoot about 72.5% of the free throw line. Neither here nor there, but they've executed well on the inside, top 100 team with their 2-point shooting percentage with Riley Allen patch, 13.6 boards. Emmanuel Kanga only gives you about 4.5 points, but does give you 5 rebounds, a few offensive boards as well. I do think that for George Mason, they're able to break this pressure, and they do find a way to be able to get some good looks and get the job done. So I did set George Mason as a favorite of 6 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with them, and I set a total of a 138. I do think that you get those late fouls, and George Mason being able to break that pressure helps you out with the over. So in on the over and willing to lay with George Mason. 7-3, 7-4. LaSalle is on the road against Duquesne. Duquesne 11 to 11.5 point favorites. 144 to 145.5 is the total, and I made Duquesne the 13.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. You've got a LaSalle team that's looking to play very slowly. They're 11th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, for Duquesne, this team is right now checking in about 51st in the country, though they have been slowing down a little bit more recently. It's a Duquesne team that's going to allow some second and third chances there in terms of defensive rebound percentage, right around about 166th in the country. And the lone thing LaSalle's been okay with is being able to give themselves some second and third chances on the offensive glass. Top 140 team with regards to offensive rebound percentage, but his team just flat out can't shoot for LaSalle. Right now, they're a country average team with their free throw shooting percentage, but they're outside the top 325 with their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentages, and they're outside the top 310 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. You've had Jaden Marshall along Jerome Brewer combined for about 24 points per game. Marshall's shooting about 34% from 3, and he is pretty much the only guy in the roster that shoots about 33.3% from 3. Eric Acker also shoots 33% from the outside, but he's right now dealing with injury, so that's not great to say the least. And for this LaSalle team, they are just exploring any sort of competent offense whatsoever. Meanwhile, John Hughley has been in and out of the lineup recently for Duquesne, but you still have your main two guards out there in Jimmy Williams here and Goonyard combining for about 33 points per contest. You've had Goonyard shoot about 38.5% from 3 points. Duquesne as a whole shoots about 35.5% from 3, so I fully expect them to exploit a LaSalle team that's just not been good around the perimeter whatsoever. It's a LaSalle team that's also outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and for Duquesne, that's been a big issue for them as well. This is a Duquesne team that's just been a little bit sloppier than what you'd like, 234th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but LaSalle doesn't really force a lot of ball pressure. And then you've got Jacob Nieses, 8 points, 5.5 boards, shooting 45.5% from three-point range, even with Hughley being in and out. I do think that this team is going to have a nice edge on the glass. Steven Dixon has been able to give you about 5 rebounds per game, and with this Duquesne team, I do think that they do a nice job being able to keep their possessions clean, and they're also a top 60 team in terms of executing with regards to 2-point shooting percentage. I think that that's going to be enough to cover the numbers, so willing to lay with Duquesne. I made them a 13.5 point favorite, and I made my total of 145.5. I think that they played just fast enough and just efficient enough to get you the over, so in on the over and willing to lay with Duquesne. 7-5, 7-6 Loyola Chicago is on the road against Fordham. Fordham is a 9 to a 9.5 point favorite. 138.5 to 139.5 is the total, and I made a total of a 133. I like the under. These are two teams that are really looking to slog up games. 354th is where Fordham is in terms of total possessions per game. Loyola Chicago a little bit faster at 306th, but neither of these teams are doing a very good job in terms of shooting it from the outside, and the only thing that Loyola Chicago has really done an okay job of this season is that their interior play on defense has not been too bad. You've got Miles Rubin, who's able to give you 6+ boards, multiple blocks per contest. It's a Loyola Chicago team that, in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, has been a top 100 mark in the country that goes into the top 75 when they're away from home. Meanwhile, it's a Fordham team that's 98th in the country in terms of points per possession when they're at home, and they just don't shoot it well at home. 357th at 27.9%. Loyola Chicago, they themselves have been outside the top 275 with their 3-point shooting percentage as well, so I think that this is going to be a rough game. Now, Fordham has the big advantage on the glass. They're a top 65 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, top 30 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage, as you've had Christian Henry do a nice job, give you 11.5 points, 5 assists per contest. Azure Reeves is your main scorer, 17 points, 4 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals per contest. It's a Fordham team that's country average in terms of taking care of the ball and generating turnovers, so neither here nor there in Loyola Chicago. They're a bottom 50 team in the country in terms of generating turnovers, so this Fordham team is not going to be under duress. For Fordham, they've been a top 50 team themselves in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but with Fordham as well outside the top 260 with their free throw shooting percentage. And on the flip side of things, I do think that Loyola Chicago is going to continue to get a little bit more moving forward out of Xavier Amos. He was missing towards the front part of the season. When he's been out there, he's been able to give you about 10.5 points per contest. Has been a little bit in and out of the lineup, but I would think that he and Justin Moore should be good to go here. Moore has really been your top scorer when he's been healthy with about 11.5 points per game. And then you've had Joseph Hall. Joseph be a little bit of a disappointment, shooting only about 29% from 3. I think that goes a little bit northward, and I do think that this is going to be a very rough game to say the least. Loyola Chicago, they themselves shooting 67% of the free throw line. That's 346th in the country, so made a total of 133. I'm in on the under, and I think that in the slug, Loyola Chicago holds in there. 7 at 7, so I'm going to be willing to take the points. 7-7, 7-8. Oklahoma's on the road against Tennessee. Tennessee is a 10.5 to an 11.5 point favorite. 149.5 is the total, and I set Tennessee as a 12.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay it. It's an Oklahoma team that overall has been a pretty efficient offense. They're a top 40 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but it does take quite a bit of a drop-off when they're away from home. Away from home, they are averaging 16.1 points fewer per 100 possessions rather than when they are at home, and Tennessee is 50th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they've been significantly better when they've been at home this far this season, as they do average about 15.5 points more per 100 possessions at home. The biggest thing for Tennessee, they've got to do a better job in terms of cleaning up the turnovers, as this team is currently 272nd in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and Oklahoma has been one of the better teams in the country in terms of taking care of the ball themselves, as they've got a veteran backcourt with Nigel Pack along Xavier Brown, combining for 32.1 points per game between the two of them, 6.3 assists, and Pack is packing it in at about 43% from 3-point, but Oklahoma's outside the top 260 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and they've been outside the top 180 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Just not doing a great job on any of those fronts. Now they face off against a Tennessee team that is really going to be able to take away that 3-point shooting, as well as Tennessee has been able to do a really good job on the just fundamentals of the game. They're number 1 in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and they allow teams to shoot just 29.9% from 3-point. That's a top 20 mark in the country. Jacoby Gillespie has been turning the ball over a little bit too much, but he still has been your top scorer overall for the season, as he's putting in there about 18 points, 5.5 assists per game, as shoots 36% from 3, and overall, Nate Amon, 17.5 points, 6.4 rebounds per game, but in conference play, over 20 points per game. We've really seen him explode here in the last few weeks, and Bishop Boswell in conference play and conference play only does shoot about 45% from 3-point. It's a Tennessee team that's playing a little bit faster than they have in the past. In terms of total possessions, ranked 168th in the country. It's an Oklahoma group that they're right now checking in more around about 142nd, and with just how inefficient this Oklahoma defense is in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, this team is right now checking in outside the top 200 in the country. As a matter of fact, 257th. I do think that Tennessee is going to be able to do just enough to be able to cover this number, and with Tennessee still being a top 45 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, I think that keeps you under. So I'm willing to lay with Tennessee, made them a 12.5 point favorite, and I like the under. I set my total at a 146.5, 7-9, 7-10. Sam Houston State is going to be playing us in Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee, it's an underdog of 5.5 points. 151.5 to 152.5 is the total. Set a line of an 8.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Sam Houston State. For Sam Houston State, this is a team that's very much looking to push some tempo. 70th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. For Middle Tennessee, this is a pretty slow and controlled team. Right now, they are, in terms of total possessions per game, finding themselves well outside the top 225 at 229th. And I will say for Middle Tennessee, they're very pedestrian, just a lot of their different metrics. They're about 240th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're about 207th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. One thing that they've always been relatively okay with was being able to guard the 3-point line. Right now, their line teams to shoot about 34.3% per three. That's the top 200 mark in the country. Meanwhile, for Sam Houston State, they have been a very good team around the perimeter. At home, teams are only shooting about 30% from 3-point range against them. And for this Middle Tennessee team, just not a team that's really going to give themselves a lot of second and third chances to score. 228th with regards to their offensive rebound percentage. Meanwhile, you've got a Sam Houston State team that just by committee has been a top 100 team with regards to percentage of their own missed shots. They result in an offensive rebound. Middle Tennessee has a nice go-to scorer in Kamari Lance, who's been able to give you about 14 points, 4 boards, shoots 35% per three. And then Torrey Olson down low, a little bit over a block, 13 points per game. But for Middle Tennessee, it's just been a lot of mix and match. They only shoot 68.5% at the free throw line. They've been outside the top 150, both in their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And for Sam Houston, even with the TCU transfer and Isaiah Manning, right now deal with an injury, if you count him out, that still leaves you with 7 different guys to give you between 8 and 14 points per game. With Po Boy King, great name, coming over from NC Central, leading the way with 14.5 points, shoots 36.5% from 3-point range. But Kejo Elich, who comes over from Loyola Maryland, 10.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. It's a Sam Houston State team that has been very dominant around the outside, and with them being able to pull in their second and third chances, it's made all the more lethal by the fact that this is a team that they do shoot it as well as they do from 3-point range. In their home game, Sam Houston State right now is shooting about 35% per three, which actually goes up to 38.2% away from home. But just having all the different options that they do, they've been a top 225 team in terms of generating turnovers as well. Middle Tennessee isn't generating turnovers the way that they have in the past. Sam Houston, I do think gets the job done, and I just don't think that Middle Tennessee does a par with this total. So I set my total 148.5, like the under, and for Sam Houston State, one to lay it, set them as an 8.5 point favorite. 7-11, 7-12, Drake is going to be playing us to Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois, 1 to 1.5 point favorites, 149.5 to 115.5 is the total, and I made Drake the 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. Here's a big reason why you just can't trust Southern Illinois in this rather toss-up game. It's because they are just so darn awful at the free throw line. Southern Illinois, 318 shooting, 68.2% at the free throw line. Drake is not amazing, but at home they do shoot about 75.1% at the free throw line. So if this is a 1 or 2 possession game late, that is going to be big. Now, Drake has been really bad with regards to their defense right now in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. 284th in the country, and outside the top 300 in their home games. Southern Illinois, they've actually been a really good defense. They're 42nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Southern Illinois is getting absolutely nothing generated on offense, so they're 277th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Drake is more around about 137th, and that climbs up into the top 125 in their home games. As for Southern Illinois, they're a top 20 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from inside the 3-point line. They're only about 140th with that 2-point shooting percentage, and they've been having a tough time in terms of taking care of the ball, and that should be a nice forte for this Drake team, as Southern Illinois is about 187th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Drake taking care of the ball, they're about 39th, and for Drake, this is a little bit more of a mid-tempo team. Meanwhile, Southern Illinois, they're looking to bump up the tempo. Drake is about 15th in terms of total possessions per game, and Southern Illinois more around about 68th, but with Drake, they are going to have the best scorer in this game in Jalen Quinn, who's been supplying the team with 19.8 points, shoots 36% from 3-point. Sean Thomas, he throws in there about 9.5 points per game, shoots about 33% from 3-point. Oku Frederico has been able to give you about 5 boards, and Andrew Aliyah is throwing in there about 4.5 rebounds per game as well. And other than Kelron House, you don't have anyone for the Southern Illinois team that really gives you double figures on the regular, as he supplies about 15 points, 3 boards, 3 assists. And then Rollins Alajibi and his brother Prince Alajibi have been able to do a nice job on the boards. They combine for about 12.5 rebounds per game. Prince is giving you 7.5 points per game. Rollins gives you 10.5 points per game. But for Southern Illinois, out of 365 Division I teams, if you include D1 and non-D1 games, they are 365th with their three-point shooting percentage at 27.6%. You've got Damian Mayo's been able to shoot about 37.5% from three, and Rollins Alajibi shoots 42.5% from three. They're the lone two guys on the roster that really shoot above 28% from three-point range, with Southern Illinois not being able to execute at the free throw line as well. They are a team that's a top 100 team in terms of generating turnovers. I do think that it's an interesting circumstance where I do trust in Drake to be able to cover at the free throw line, so I said Drake is 1.5 point favorite. I like them on the money line. Made a total of a 149.5. Here at a 150 plus. I just don't think that Southern Illinois sinks enough shots for the over, so in on the under and Drake on the money line. 7-13, 7-14. Jacksonville State is on the road against Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech 2.5 to 3 point favorite, so on scheme 130.5 to 132.5, and I like the under. I set my total at a 128.5. Neither of these teams are going to be pushing any tempo whatsoever. 316th is where this Jacksonville State team is in terms of total possessions per game. Louisiana Tech 321st, and if you find yourself in a cover spot, neither of these teams are great there. For Jacksonville State, 311th with regards to their free throw shooting percentage. It's a Louisiana Tech team that they are 359th in the country, and Louisiana Tech is a bottom 30 team in the country with regards to their three-point shooting percentage, but where this team has been able to shine is being able to give themselves some second and third chances. For Louisiana Tech, in terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, they're actually 33rd in the country. At home, they rebound about 37.1% of their misses, and Jacksonville State is typically a really dominant team on the glass. Not so much this year. Jacksonville State is only about 200th in the country with regards to percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Now, that does go into the top 100 when they're away from home, but for Louisiana Tech, I did set them here as a favorite of just 2 points, mainly because of that bad free throw shooting percentage. It's just really hard to trust this team, especially with them shooting only 29.1% from three. That is a bottom 10 mark in the country, but I do think that they can pull this game off outright because they have been a top 30 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You're in the top 125. In terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, DJ Dudley is able to give you 13.5 points. He shoots 38% from three. Lone guy on the roster right now shooting above 33.3% from three. AJ Bates, Scooter Williams, they both give you between 10.8 and 11 points per contest. And then on the flip side of things, you've got a Jacksonville State team that has been able to get quite a bit out of Mustafa El Montequil. He supplies 18 points, 7 boards, only shooting about 30% from three, but then you got AC Bryant shooting 40% from three with about 12.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Makara Erkins Ford has been able to give you about 4 boards, 8.5 points per game. It's a Jacksonville State team that has been able to do a very good job on the inside themselves. They've been a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Not a team that really is going to put you under too much stress, but I think that this is going to be a nip-and-tuck slog of a game. I think that in the end, Louisiana Tech has just enough to be able to win the game outright, but going to set my line at 2. So at the 2.5, 3, I'm going to be willing to take the points from Jacksonville State. And I like the under. I set my total 128. 7-15, 7-16. Troy is going to be on the road against Louisiana Monroe. The men of Troy are a double-figure favorite here of 15.5 to 16 points. Totals 153 to 153.5. Set a total of 157. I do like the over. Got a Troy team that's been looking to push a nice tempo this year. 80th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Warp set, though, they played the double overtime game against San Diego State, the triple overtime game against USC. So if you take those out of the fold in terms of possessions per 40 minutes, more around probably about 100th in the country. Monroe is looking to push a lot of tempo. 65th in terms of total possessions per game, so I do like the over. I set my total 157. Now, Monroe is not going to give themselves any sort of second and third chances. 345th in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Troy is going to. In games played away from home, this is a top 55 team in terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but also it's not quite the same Troy defense that we've seen in the past. They're just a hair inside the top 100 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Overall, about 157th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Louisiana Monroe was shooting it really well from three-point towards the beginning part of the season. That has had quite a bit of a fall. If they're down to about 221st in terms of the three-point shooting percentage, but that goes up to about 35% at home, and I do think that they're going to be able to find a few cracks in this Troy team. As for Louisiana Monroe, you've got a pair of guys that have really headlined things with their scoring. Christian Lewis, 17.5 points, 4.5 boards, shoots about 32.5% from three. Batavius Russell, 15.5 points. He throws in there a steal and a block per contest. Lavelle Broneau was dealing with injury. He's back. He's your lone guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, 8.5 boards, right around about 15 points per game. And for Monroe, they are certainly going to give it up on the inside. They're outside the top 340 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, if you had a Troy bunch that has Thomas Stout being able to give you a double-double, 14.4 points, 10 boards, throws in there a steal and a half and a block and a half per contest, and 36% 3-point shooting. All sorts of versatility there, but it's also a Troy team that has been outside the top 135 with regards to opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. While Troy has been able to do a nice job reeling in there some second and third chances for themselves, I do think that they're going to be able to give this bunch a few second and third chances as well. With Troy, their 274th in the country with regards to their defensive rebound percentage as well, though I do like the Campbell brothers in Cooper and Kobe Campbell. Kobe, about 9.7 points, shoots 44% for three. Cooper, 12.5 points, 4.5 assists, steal and a half, shoots 39% for three. And Victor Valdez, while he doesn't shoot a ball from the outside, he's your top scorer with about 15.5 points per game. I think that you get a nice scoring expose, but do you think that Monroe is going to be able to find some good looks from the outside, which will help them hold within the summer? Semi-line at 13, so take the points with Monroe, and I'm in on the over, so I told 157, 717, 718. Evansville is going to be playing up to Illinois, Chicago. UIC does find themselves at a 7.5 point road favorite, so on this game, 138.5 to 139, and I'm going to be able to take the points with Evansville. I set my line at a 7 for this Illinois, Chicago team. It's just really hard in terms of being able to trust them to be able to do the little things. Now, Illinois, Chicago, top 35 team with regards to percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they allow a lot of second and third chances themselves. With Illinois, Chicago, in terms of percentage of opponents' misses that become an offensive rebound, they are 313th in the country, and games played away from home, about 33.8% opponents' missed shots become an offensive rebound. Now, Evansville is about 194th in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but at home, teams only grab about 23.9% of their misses, and what is really big for this Evansville team is that their leader in rebounds and counter turnovers overall for the season, they able to give you about 11.5 rebounds per game. He dealt with injury for about 10 games. He's back. And you also have A.J. Casey, give you about 12 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. They have actually found an okay facilitator in Leaf Muller, about 10.5 points, 4 assists per game. Now, Evansville sloppy with the ball. They are outside the top 320 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. And this is an Illinois Chicago team that's been very supreme in terms of being able to generate turnovers. In terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, you've got an Illinois Chicago team that has found themselves in the top 45 in all of college basketball, and it has been able to travel quite well, but they're also a team that's outside the top 295 with regards to their three-point shooting percentage as well. For Illinois Chicago, it's just been a little bit up, down, all around for them thus far this season. As for this Illinois Chicago team, the backcourt play has been a little bit flaky as they themselves are outside the top 225 in terms of ball security. They have a trio of guys, Andy Johnson, Ahmad Henderson, and Elijah Crawford, that'll give you between 11.5 to 12.5 points per game. With Johnson, he is a top three-point shooter out of the three guys at about 33% from the outside, and it's not an Illinois Chicago team that's necessarily looking to pop a lot of threes. In terms of percentage of their shots that do come from three-point range, they're outside the top 300 in all of college basketball, but it's not even like they're necessarily doing the world's greatest job of being able to execute on the inside as well. In terms of their two-point shooting percentage, this team is checking in right around about 253rd in all of college basketball. Evansville, they themselves have their issues here. They're about 258th in the country, but it does improve a little bit more at home with Evansville also being a unit that, with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, is right around about 200th. I think that Evansville holds in there, and I think that Evansville is going to certainly have their turnover issues. They're about 245th in terms of total possessions per game, but they do just enough to hold in this game against an Illinois Chicago team that they need to cover at the free throw line, shoots about 73.5%. So, made a total of 137. I'm in on the under end. At 7.5 plus, willing to take those points with Evansville. 719, 720 on the card. Kennesaw State, we give our to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. They are on the road against Missouri State. Missouri State is a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite. It's all this game between 153.5 to a 154, and I like the under. I set my total at a 148.5 with Kennesaw State. Overall for the season, they're 15th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but since they lost Simeon Cottle, he was part of the FBI probe and everything like that. That was their main point guard. He was supplying the team with 20 plus points, 3.8 assists per game. They have been slowed down by about 6, maybe even 7 possessions per game ever since then, so they have not been quite the same team there, and they're built much more on their defense as of right now. 40th in the country with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you've got a Missouri State team that has been anything but explosive with regards to their three-point shooting, as right now for Missouri State, they shoot at home 30.5% from three-point shooter and 17th in the country, and they're 251st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Neither of these teams amazing on offense. For Kennesaw State, 156th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, about 224th with Missouri State. And for Missouri State, they are going to need to key in on R.J. Johnson. He's really taken over the point guard duties, with Cottle being out 16 points, 4 assists in conference play for R.J. Johnson. And really the name of the game here for Kennesaw State is second and third chances. They're a top 40 team with regards to percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Fraquan Sherman being that main man with about 9 points, 8 rebounds per game. And then Brandon Skip-to-my-Lou, Trey Simpson, they combine for about 10.7 rebounds per game. And Lou has been able to give you about a block and a half per game as well, but we really don't have a lot of explosive three-point shooting now that Cottle is out of the fold as well. You've actually had Amari Taylor shoot 53% for three, but on very, very, very low volume. Meanwhile, for Missouri State, you've been able to get some relatively good production out of Michael Osi-Banusu down low. He only stands right around about 6'4", but he's supplying about 14.5 points, 7 rebounds per game, and then the Williams have been able to step up with their three-point shooting. Kobe Williams, 15 points on 38% three-point shooting. Trey Williams, 34.5% three-point 3-point shooter, 8 points per game. These are the lone two guys other than Antoine Burnett, who's dealt with injury all season long, shooting above 33% from the outside. Keith Ballack has been able to give you 18 points per game, but for Missouri State, they shoot just 67.5% at the free throw line in a fresher spot. Kennesaw State is a little bit better than that, but man, they've been having some woes at the free throw line as well. Right now for Kennesaw State, they shoot at the free throw line right around about 70.5%. That actually improves to 74.5% away from home, but that said, I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a slog and a little bit of a, shall we say, hairy game. And for Missouri State, they've been about a country average team with regards to opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They've been a top 155 team in terms of generating turnovers. It has been a Kennesaw team that all season long has had a little bit of tough time taking care of the ball outside the top 225 with regards to ball security. And I do think that even though Kennesaw State has a little bit of an edge in terms of being able to just hit the boards, I do think that Missouri State does just enough to get the job done all right, but I could only set my line at 1.5. I just don't trust this team to be able to cover even this small of a number with that free throw shooting. So at 2+, won't take the points with Kennesaw State. Think that this is going to be a little bit of a rough offensive game. I'm in on the under semi-total at a 148.5. 721, 722. Oral Roberts is on the road against Omaha. Omaha, 9.5 point favorite. So on this game, 150 to 151. And I did set Omaha here as a favorite of 10 points. So I'm going to be one to lay the 9.5. It's an Oral Roberts team that has just had an almighty tough time with regards to both their offense and their defense. They're really not executing on the inside outside the top 3 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, 259th with their own 2-point shooting percentage on offense, and they're just not taking care of the ball. This team is outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. They're 317th in terms of generating turnovers on defense. Now, Omaha's not going to give you any sort of turnovers whatsoever either. This team is outside the top 325 in terms of generating turnovers on defense as well. So both of these teams are going to get a lot of good, clean possessions. And for Oral Roberts, you have had Ty Harper do a nice job in terms of leading the way. 16 points per game, throws in there about 2.5 assists per contest, but only shoots about 31.5% from 3. Team as a whole shoots 31% from 3 outside the top 3 in the country. And in conference play, that goes down to 28.2% from 3, which is remarkable because in conference play, they're also allowing teams to shoot 42% from 3-point. So they're just getting absolutely blasted from the outside right now. And for Omaha, you've got a guy in Paul DeBoche who comes over from Miami. He was missing for pretty much the entirety of non-conference play in the 15 games that he's played. 19.5 points, 6.5 boards, and has been a 44% 3-point shooter. And Omaha as a whole has been able to shoot about 36.5% from 3-point range if you involve non-Division I games. They've overall been a top 100 team with this regard. And for Lance Waddles, he's a guy that returns from a season ago. He's been able to do a nice job in terms of supplying 13 points. He shoots 39% from 3. Tony Osborne, 38% 3-point shooter, 13 points per game, and throws in there a little bit over a steal per game as well. Now, outside DeBoche, you don't have a single guy that gives you over 4.7 rebounds per game, but guess who else doesn't do a great job on the glass? Oral Roberts, outside the top 225 with regards to their own rebound percentage. You've got Ofri Nave, who's been able to give you 6 rebounds, 12.5 points per game. Nobody else on the roster gives you over 4.3 rebounds per game, so that's going to be offset. I do think that Omaha is going to be able to run some good, clean, efficient offense. They're more of a mid-tempo team, 163rd in terms of total possessions per game. Oral Roberts is 149th. I just don't know if Oral Roberts is going to be able to do quite enough to be able to get you the over. So I did set a total of a 150 here at 150.5, 151.5 in on the under. And with Omaha, willing to lay up to 9.5 with them. 723, 724. North Dakota State is going to be on there against South Dakota State. South Dakota State, home underdog of 1 to 1.5 points. 146.5 to 147.5 is the total. And I said South Dakota State as the 1.5 point favorite. Going to take them as the very small money line underdog for North Dakota State. This has been a unit that has been able to do a really good job in terms of generating turnovers. They're a country average team in terms of their tempo. They're about 181st in terms of total possessions per game. And this has been a team that's really stepped up to the plate with regards to their defense. They're not a top 115 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. South Dakota State, they're more around about 204th, but I do think that South Dakota State is going to be able to keep the ball clean despite the fact that North Dakota State has all of a sudden become 50th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis and games played away from home. That ascends into the top 35. South Dakota State not going to put you under any sort of duress whatsoever at home. They're well outside the top 3 in terms of generating turnovers, but that said, this is a South Dakota State team that has been one of the more efficient teams at home with their offense in all of college basketball. They're averaging about 19.7 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home, in specifically their home games. They're a top 60 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. For North Dakota State, they've actually traveled really well with their offense away from home. In games played away from home, this is all of a sudden a top 40 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. I did set my total here of a 147.5, so 146.5, 147. That's my max buy point on the over. But for South Dakota State, I do like the way that the wealth is just distributed across this team as you've got a quartet of different guys. They're giving you double figures. Right now, that top scorer is Joe Saylor, 13.5 points, shoots 41% from 3, and then Kellen Gary Gray and Jaden Jackson both shoot between 34.5% and 35% from three between the two of them. 24 points per contest. Damian Wilkerson has been able to give you 6.5 boards, 13.5 points per game. And while this is a bunch that might have a little bit of a tough time on the inside, the one thing that South Dakota has been able to do a really good job of is on allowing second and third chances. In terms of defensive rebound percentage, they've got the edge. North Dakota State is about 56th in the country in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. Now, South Dakota State overall is more around about 65th, but if you look specifically at their home games, teams are grabbing 18.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is number 4 in all of college basketball. And then for North Dakota State, you've been able to get a lot of production out of Damari Wheeler-Thomas. He's been one of your top men with about 13.5 points, 3 assists per game. Makai Strickland doesn't give you any sort of three-point shooting, but 13.5 points. He's a nice little slasher that gives you a steal per game. Travion Kaysen, 2 steals, 13 points, 6.5 boards, shoots about 41% for 3. But in the end, I do think that South Dakota State on their own floor, with them being much more efficient on the offensive side of things when they are at home, is just enough for them to be able to get the job done. Did set my line at a 1.5, so like South Dakota State on the money line, and at a 147 or less, I'm in on the over. 725, 726. Charlotte is on the road against Tulsa. Tulsa is a double-figure favorite of 12.5 to 13.5 points. 149.5 to 115.5 is the total. Meanwhile, line 13.5. So the 12.5 is pretty much my max lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay it for Tulsa. They're a relatively mid-tempo team, while Charlotte is looking to slow things down. Charlotte 330th in terms of total possessions per game. Tulsa 169th, and Tulsa has been having a few issues on offense, but they're still one of the most efficient teams they're going to find in all of college basketball. Tulsa is a team that ranks 16th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Charlotte has not been too bad themselves at about 105th. Charlotte is a team that's outside the top 200 in terms of ball security, but they're doing a nice job coming up with second and third chances. They are 72nd in the country in terms of percentage of their own missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. But here's where the undoing comes in for Charlotte. They have not guarded the three-point line very well. They're allowing teams to shoot about 34% for three. That's about 177th in all of college basketball. Tulsa at home does allow teams to shoot about 34.5% from the outside, but it's a Tulsa team that is a top 10 team with their three-point shooting percentage at right around about 38.5%, and then you've been able to have a trio of guys that have just been able to explode for this team. Tylen Riley, 14.5 points, 3.8 assists, shoots 40% for three. Miles Barnstable, 42% three-point shooter, and he also shoots 93% at the free throw line. In a pressure spot, Tulsa, they shoot 78.5% the free throw line, top 15 mark in the country, and then David Green, overall for the season, 16.5 points on 39% three-point shooting, but in conference play, that ascends to 48% three-point shooting, and it is also a Tulsa team that has been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of not allowing second and third chances. Someone like an Ian Smichael, even though he gives you about 5 or so points per contest, he throws in their 4 boards per contest. For Tulsa, they've been a top 150 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Charlotte more around about 254th. You do have Anton Boinke, though, for the Charlotte team. He's been able to give you double figures. He's a 7'1" big man that comes over from Providence that has actually been able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range. And then Desane Mingo, Ben Bradford have been your top 2 scorers. They combine for about 25 points per game. And Mingo shoots 38.5% from 3, 4 assists per game, and you've had quite a bit of production from the outside of Damari Harrison, along with Arden Coyers, as both shoot about 41% from 3 points, combined for about 17.5 points per game. Very interesting spot here for Charlotte. They do shoot about 70.5% at the free throw line, neither here nor there, but I do think that Tulsa going to be efficient enough to be able to get the job done. I set my total at a 149.5. With how slowly Charlotte plays, I just don't think you get enough possessions for the over, so in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 13 here, which also made them a 13.5 point favorite. 727, 728. You got Maryland on the road against Northwestern. Northwestern is a 7.5 to an 8.5 point favorite. Total on this game, 142.5 to 143.5. Made Northwestern the 8.5 point favorite. So I'm going to be willing to lay up to 8 with them for Northwestern. This is a group that has been not good on the defensive glass, or well outside the top 225 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Maryland not doing a great job themselves. Away from home, they're allowing teams to grab about 31.2% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That's well outside the top 225. And this is not a Maryland team that's going to be able to execute on the inside. And that's where you want to attack this Northwestern bunch. As for Maryland, they, in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage right now, are 291st in all of college basketball. Northwestern, they're about 129th, and the one thing that you can say for Northwestern is that they're going to get a lot more clean possessions in this game, as Northwestern, number 4 in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. It's a Maryland team that's been giving up open look upon open look as well outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Northwestern, they're a good 3-point shooting defense. They're 101st in the country. Maryland is not. Maryland is right now allowing teams to shoot from the outside right around about 37.3%. That is 343rd in all of college basketball. And for Northwestern, you've got by far the best player out there on the floor, as Nick Martinelli is absolutely lighting it up with 22 points, 6.5 boards, and is a 43% three-point shooter. Pretty much nobody else on the roster shoots above 34% from the outside, but Arrington Page, 10.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Trey Singleton has been able to throw in their 5 boards per contest as well for this Northwestern team. They're not going to give themselves any sort of second and third chances, but with Maryland, even though you have had a few pieces that were out to begin the season come back, like your top rebounder in Solomon Washington with about 10.9 rebounds per game, it just really hasn't improved for the team. They are still outside the top 275 with their own three-point shooting percentage, even with David Hewitt, give you about 36.5% shooting from the outside, 15 points per game. He's been their top scorer for Alpine, being out Arius Adams, gives you about 12 points per contest as well. But with Maryland being outside the top 260 with regards to their own ball security, with them having some big-time issues down low, being outside the top 290 with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, I do think that Northwestern goes out there, gets the job done. And even though these are not necessarily teams that really push a ton of tempo, Maryland about 228th in terms of total possessions per game, Northwestern 281st. I think that you get just enough efficiency for the over. Semi-total 144.5, so like the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 8 with Northwestern. 729, 730. Florida Atlantic is on the road against UTSA. Meet the Roadrunners find themselves as 13 to 13.5 point home underdogs. So on this game, 157.5 to 158.5. I'm willing to lay with Florida Atlantic. I set them as a 15.5 point favorite. It's a UTSA team that I just wish I knew what they were doing right. I mean, they have been awful on offense and awful on defense. Now, they had a nice triumph against Charlotte a few nights ago, but UTSA is 350th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they're stunningly less efficient at home rather than away from home. Only Maine is averaging fewer points per possession at home than this bunch. Meanwhile, you got a Florida Atlantic team that is a top 150 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Now, Florida Atlantic has been giving it up a little bit from the outside. They're 237th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but they're going to be able to absolutely dominate on the glass. As for this UTSA team, they're outside the top 330 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Florida Atlantic, they're overall 74th in terms of their rebound percentage. And Cannon Carlisle, guy that's been able to give you over 13 points per game. He was missing for a few games in the backcourt. He's now back to the fold for this team. Not necessarily a great three-point shooter, but gives you about 3 assists per game. And then you got Isaiah Home, who's been able to give you about 39% three-point shooting, 13 points per game. Devin Vanterpool, 6 boards, 16 points per game. And this is one of the better shot blocking teams in the country with Devin Williams, 2.5 blocks, 7.5 points, right around about 5 rebounds per game. And on the flip side for UTSA, Jameer Simpson has been actually a pretty nice go-to scorer. He's supplied the team with about 16 points, 4 boards, pair of assists, doesn't necessarily shoot it well from 3, but I mean, it's 30.7% three-point shooting is better than the team average of 29.2%. You got Brent Moss shooting 33% from 3, and he's the lone guy on the roster that is making over 33.5% of his three-point shots. You've just not been able to have anything on defense with this team either. They're outside the top 275 with regards to opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage as well. They're getting dump trucked down the glass. They're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. So I do think the Florida Atlantic going to be able to win this game comfortably, even though we did see a little bit of a triumph from UTSA in their previous game. Prior to that, they had lost by 16 plus points in each of their previous 3 games, with them having a little bit of a close one against UAB. But man, it just appears to be very, very rough with Florida Atlantic getting healthy at the right time. So set my line at 15.5. I'm willing to lay up to 15 with Florida Atlantic, and did set a total here of a 155.5. So right now we're getting about 158.5. I just don't think the UTSA does their part with this total. So in on the under 731, 732. DePaul is on the road against Seton Hall. Seton Hall is a favorite of 8.5 points. 131.5 to 132.5 is the total, and I did set Seton Hall as an 8.5 point favorite. So we're going to be waiting for a little bit of line movement here. I've seen an 8 out there before, and at an 8 it would be my absolute max lay. As for both of these teams, their forte is their defense. Either of these teams have been lighting it up on offense. Both are outside the top 165 with regards to points scored on a per possession basis, and Seton Hall is clearly the better defense in this case. Now, DePaul, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 67th in the country, but in games played away from home, they are giving up 16.7 points more per 100 possessions, and for Seton Hall, 15th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, top 20 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and you do have a DePaul group that has been pretty sloppy with the ball. Right now, they're turning the ball over 12 times per game. That's outside the top 210 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. And for DePaul, they're outside the top 185 with regards to both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. And let's say that they go to the free throw line, they shoot 69.7% at the charity stripe. That is outside the top 260 in all of college basketball. And that's where the majority of the points that this Seton Hall group gives up. As in terms of free throw attempts allowed per field goal attempt, it's a Seton Hall group that is right now about 319th in all of college basketball. So they're looking to send you to the free throw line, and DePaul's not going to be able to cash in there, as they do have CJ Cohen, who's been able to give you 13.5 points, shoots about 35% from 3, and He and your next top scorer in Landon Blocker both shoot above 74.5% of the free throw line. Pretty much the lone two guys on the roster are shooting a relatively respectable percentage. Caleb Banks, he's been able to shoot about 75% of the free throw line, but he only gives you about 6 points per game. And then you've got NJ Benson, who supplies 7 rebounds per game. But for Seton, even though you only have 2 guys on the roster, really give you over 4 rebounds per game. They've been able to do a nice job on the glass, as you've got a guy in Nigel Hines, who's been able to give you about 6 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and then Stephon Payne, the Payne train, 7 boards per game. As for Seton, they are a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots. They result in an offensive rebound. Now, they're outside the top 275 in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, but also a top 25 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And you've got Adam Clark, who's done a really good job in terms of being Mr. Do-It-All, 2 steals, 5 assists, 12.5 points per game. TJ Simpkins shoots 40.5% from 3. He's been able to give you 10.5 points per game. AJ Sam McRae gives you 12 plus points per contest as well. Now, Seton Hall is also a team that's country average about 71.8% at the free throw line as well, but I do think that you get a very, very much rough game here. Seton Hall is at 287th in terms of total possessions per game. DePaul, they're playing a little bit faster, but not a ton, at about 241st, so set a low total here for 128.5. I'm in on the under end with Seton Hall. I'm willing to lay up to 8 with them. 733, 734. Utah is going to be on the road against West Virginia. West Virginia, favorites of 10 to 10.5 points, 131.5 to 132.5 is the total, and I made a total here of 135.5. I like the over. Utah is right now 300th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, West Virginia, a slow defense-oriented team, 351st in terms of total possessions per game. They're about 23rd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they do now have to face off against a Utah group that's been very good with their outside shooting away from home. They're shooting 37.5% for 3, and that is a top 40 mark in the country. And for West Virginia, they themselves shoot about 34% from 3-point. They're hovering right around about country average in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentages, but this has been a group that has been able to shoot it much better from 3-point when they've been at home, as that ascends to about 34.7% from the outside, as Hunter Huff, he huffs, he puffs, and he shoots about 36% for 3 with his 15.5 points per game. Trayson Eaglestaff has been able to up his game here in conference play, as well as in conference play he's been averaging double figures, shooting about 40% for 3. In Big 12 play, Brandon Lorient gives you good versatility with about 11 points, pair of assists, 5 rebounds per game, and Jasper Floyd on low volume shoots 39% from 3-point as well. I did set West Virginia's 11.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number mainly because I just don't think that Utah is able to do enough on defense to be able to hold in there. They're going to have to go up against Harlan Obiana, who's able to give you 5 plus rebounds per game, and this Utah group has been outside the top 275 with regards to defensive rebound percentage, despite the fact that you do have perhaps the best rebounder in this game, Keno Dawes, with about 12.8 points, 9.3 rebounds per game, but he and James Okonkwo are the lone 2 guys on the roster, give you over 3.5 rebounds per game. Now, Terrence Hot Rod Brown gives you 20.5 points, shoots 33% from 3. Don McHenry, 39% 3-point shooter, 17.5 points per game. I do think that Utah sinks enough threes to be able to get you the over, but it's been a really rough defensive team all season long that hasn't traveled well, so I'm going to be in on the over, so I told 135.5, and I'm willing to lay with West Virginia. Made them an 11.5 point favorite, 735, 736. You got Virginia on the road against Georgia Tech, and Ramblin' Rock of Georgia Tech are a home underdog of double figures of 13.5 points, 146.5 to 147.5 is the total, and I did make my line 11.5, so I'm going to be willing to take the points. It's a Virginia team that's been playing at a pretty slow and controlled pace. In terms of total possessions per game, 238th in the country. Georgia Tech, I'm not sure why, but they've been looking to really run. They're up to 41st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for Georgia Tech, we have seen the defense go outside the top 100 now in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they've still been pretty solid at home this season. For Georgia Tech, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're giving up about 17.2 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home. Meanwhile, it's a Virginia team has been very solid with regards to their defense, 27th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and their control of the boards. They're a top 15 team in terms of percentage of the missed shots that results in an offensive rebound, and with Mohamed Siala, who's giving you 7.5 rebounds per game, still deal with injury for Georgia Tech. That hurts them, though. Peyton Ndongo is able to give you 13 plus points, 6.5 plus rebounds per game, so that'll help with Thaddeus Ritter, 15.5 points, throws in their 6.5 rebounds per game. This is also a really good shot blocking team with Jonah Grundle and Ogana Onyesu being able to combine for 4.6 blocks per game. Between the two of them, you only get about 14 points per game, but now you've been able to get Jakari White back as well. He shoots 45% for 3, 8.5 points per game. He was dealing with injury for much of the beginning of conference play. And then on the flip side for Georgia Tech, they're actually a halfway decent 3-point shooting team with Kwasi Reeves being able to lead the way. Kwasi Reeves is giving you about 15 points from 3 points. He's been shooting about 38% from the outside, but turnovers have really been the undoing of this team. They are about 330th 29th in the country in terms of percentage of their possessions that end in a turnover. That's why this Georgia Tech team currently outside the top 265 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Good news for them is that this Virginia team is not really going to put you under a whole lot of duress in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. This team is checking in well outside the top 200 in the country. As a matter of fact, 239th. And for Georgia Tech, you'll be able to get quite a bit as well out of Lamar Washington. 10 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. Again, the turnovers they are a little bit lacking, but at the same time, I do think that Georgia Tech is going to be able to hold in there with being a top 55 team in terms of the 3-point shooting percentage, and they've been a top 100 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, so they themselves are outside the top 275 with their own 2-point shooting percentage. Did set my line 11.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Georgia Tech, and like the under, set by total 143.5, 737, 738. St. John's is on the road against Marquette, and Marquette is a pretty sizable underdog here as you're catching with them 9.5 points, 156 after 157.5 is the total, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Marquette. Did set my line at 6.5. It is a St. John's team that is really not lighting it up with regards to their shooting. You take a look at every form of it. They are about 174th with their free throw shooting percentage, 140th with their 3-point shooting, and 183rd with their 2-point shooting percentage. For Marquette, the one thing that they've been able to do a good job of is being able to generate turnovers at home. They are 28th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis in their home games. Now, you've got a St. John's team that they themselves have been very good in terms of creating havoc as well. They're a top 45 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and they have by far the best low post presence in this game in Zuby Ejiofor, 16 points, 7.5 boards, 2 blocks, also shoots about 32% from 3, and then Dylan Mitchell throws in their 7 rebounds per game. Feels like they're getting a lot more out of Dylan Darling now as well. Overall for the season, 7 points per game in the mid-30s with regards to 3-point shooting, but he's also giving you a little bit more facilitation, which is big because right now your 2 leaders in assists are Zuby Ejiofor and Dylan Mitchell. They've been really operating without much of a point guard all season long, even though you've got good versatility out of Bryce Hopkins, and this is a group in St. John's that does a nice job getting to the free throw line, top 10 team in terms of free throw attempts per game. They're a top 30 team with regards to percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they are giving up a lot of second and third chances in games played away from home. Outside the top 225 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, Marquette not the world's worst team in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. Now, in terms of defensive rebound percentage, they are well outside the top 275 with that regard, but it is a Marquette team that in terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound in their own games, they have been a top 125 team here with Ben Gould being as good as gold with about 8.5 points, 5.5 boards, and then Nigel James has become a nice 3-point shooter for a team that needs it. 16 points per game, shoots 39% for 3. Marquette as a whole, they're outside the top 250 with their 3-point shooting percentage. Been a little bit better here in conference play, and for Marquette, they've been able to clean up some of the turnovers that were not so great towards the beginning part of the season. Still getting dump trucked on the defensive side of things outside the top 170 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I do think that with the way that they generate turnovers, it's going to be able to keep them lively in this game, and it's going to cut down on the amount of scoring chances. So set my total of 156.5. I'm going to take the under on 157 plus and take the points with Marquette. Made them a 6.5 point dog. 739, 740. You got Vanderbilt on the road against Missouri, and Missouri is a home underdog of 3.5 to 4.5 points, and their total is between 152.5 to 154, and I did take a shot here on the over. I set my total at a 159.5. Missouri is 45th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis at home, and they're playing quite a bit more slowly than they did in past seasons. Right now, about 184th in terms of total possessions per game. Vanderbilt is not playing slowly. They are 33rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and this has been a rock-solid offense, whether they be at home or on the road. For Vanderbilt, they're overall 13th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Starting to give up a little bit more defensively. You can tell that the Frankie Collins injury has really been affecting them as they're not generating as many turnovers as they did towards the beginning part of the season, but still doing a great job protecting the ball themselves. Top 25 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Duke Miles being out hurt some as well, but Tyler Tanner, 18 points, 5.5 assists, 2.5 steals, shoots 37% from 3. Tyler Nickel, he's dropping nickels, 44% 3-point shooter, 15 points per game. Ike Okareke, with all the injuries, has got more of an opportunity. He's going to give you about 9.5 points per game, and then down low, Devin McLaughlin, Jalen Washington, they've been able to combine for about 12.5 rebounds per game as well, and then flip side of things, you have a Missouri team that has been much better on the glass this year than they have been in past years. For this Missouri team, in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, they are now 39th in all of college basketball. You've had Mr. Mark Mitchell step up in a big way, 17 points, 5.5 boards, doesn't necessarily splash it in from 3 points, but Jacob Cruz, he gives you 4.5 boards at about 6'7", 6'8". He's been shooting 37% from 3. Jaden Stone, 40% 3-point shooter, 15 points per game. It is a group that has been much better at home rather than away from home now. be cautious of this. Missouri shoots 67.5% of the free throw line. That's outside the top 3 in all of college basketball, and they have been outside the top 230 with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis as well. But I do think that they're going to be able to remain relatively lively because they've been a top 45 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now they're about 300th with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, so I think that you get a nice scoring expose here. But I did set my line at 3.5 with Vanderbilt, deal with those injuries in the backcourt. So at 4+, won't take the points with Missouri. I like the over. Semi-total 159.5, 741, 742. Auburn is going to be on the road against Mississippi State. Mississippi State is a home underdog of 3.5 to 4.5 points, and your total that is anywhere between 154 to 154.5, and made a total of 157.5. I like the over. You got an Auburn team that's playing fast, but not aggressively fast. 93rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Mississippi State is pretty aggressively fast at 49th in terms of total possessions per game, and you're going to be able to get a lot of clean possessions here. Auburn is about 180th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Mississippi State, nice hearty 358th. You want to talk about a team that's creating no ball pressure whatsoever. It's Mississippi State, and shock, surprise, surprise, as per usual. This Mississippi State team not shooting it well from 3-point range. Right now, they shoot 31.3% from the outside. That goes down to 29.1% at home, but you also have an Auburn team that's outside the top 235 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Mississippi State has still been a relatively good team on the inside. They're about country average with regards to their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, but they've also been a top 150 team with regards to rebound percentage. Now, Keshawn Hall is going to be able to run things down low for Auburn. He's been incredible with about 20.5 points on board, shoots in the high 30s / low 40s from 3-point. Jabari McGee from Mississippi State actually does shoot 39% from 3 with about 8 points per game. One guy in the roster that shoots about 33% from 3, Joshua Hubbard, 21.5 points, shoots about 33% from 3-point range, and then he's been able to throw in their 3.5 assists per game as well. Mississippi State, country average team in terms of taking care of the ball for Mississippi State. They do shoot just 67.5% of the free throw line. You've got Quincy Ballard down low along with Akura combining for 12.8 rebounds per game. Between the two of them, you get about a block and a half per contest. And for Auburn, you do have a bunch that has been able to get quite a bit out of the backcourt, as well as you've got Kevin Overton, who's been able to shoot in the high 30s from 3-point. He's up to about 12 points per game. Taj Bedford, overall, the numbers are not bad. 14.7 points, 3.5 assists, but he does shoot 28% from 3. And you just expected a little bit more when he was expected to be first-round pick, so that's been an issue. But Kashawn Murphy has been able to give you about 11 points, 7 rebounds per game. And for Auburn, they do shoot about 74.5% of the free throw line. Offense has traveled relatively well. I do think that they get the job done with being very clean on the offensive side of things. Top 50 team in terms of taking care of the ball. Somehow line at 5.5. Really don't know what Mississippi State is doing well, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Auburn, and like high scoring expose here, somebody told 157.5. I like the over. 743, 744. Murray State is on the road against Illinois State. Illinois State is a 2.5 to a 3.5 point favorite. 155.5 to 156.5 is the total, and for Illinois State, made them a 2.5 point favorite at 3+. Won't take the points with Murray State. Now, this has been an Illinois State team that, if you look at their defensive metrics at home, my goodness, these guys have been absolutely sterling in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, this is home games and home games only. Number 3 in the country. Meanwhile, you've got a Murray State team that's about 228th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Here's a big reason why I just can't lay it with this Illinois State team, though. Is not really too trustworthy at the free throw line. Right now, they shoot about 70.7% at the charity stripe, 238th in the country. Murray State is actually really good at the free throw line. They're shooting 75.6% away from home, 76.3% at home, and it's a Murray State team that's going to force you to pile drive the ball down low, as they're a top 3 team in terms of percentage of opponents' field goal attempts that come from 2-point range, and it's an Illinois State team that is solid with regards to their interior offense. I'm not going to necessarily call it as supreme as they would like it to be, though, as for Illinois State right now, with their 2-point shooting percentage, they're checking in right around about 70th in the country, but at home that falls outside the top 100. Illinois State has been able to get really good production out of Chase Walker, has been giving you about 13.5 points, 5 boards per contest. Johnny Kinzinger just not shooting it the same from 3-point range as he has in the past. Right now only shooting about 30.5% from the outside, but has been able to give you about 11.5 points per game. Do think that his 3-point shooting is going to go upward sooner rather than later, but Terry Coleman, Bodie Skunberg in the interim, they've been able to shoot a combined about 42.5% per 3, both give you a combined 21 points per contest as well. And for Illinois State, they've been a very good team in terms of guarding the inside as well. They've been a top 100 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but you do have a Murray State team that away from home is a top 50 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and Fred King, the most dominant low post player in this game. 13 points, 8.5 boards, 2 blocks per contest. Javon Jackson, Roman Doman, they combine to shoot about 37% from 3 between the two of them, about 31 points per contest. For Murray State, they're a top 55 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, more around country average average 34.8% from three-point range, but I do think that they're going to be able to hold in there. It's an Illinois State team that I think might see a little bit of regression with that home and road split with regards to their defense, and I do think that Murray State does a nice job holding in there. Murray State going to be looking to push up tempo. They're a top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game. Illinois State well outside the top 225, so interesting circumstance here. So my line at 2.5, so at 3+ taking the points with Murray State, and do like the under. So my total at a 154.5, 745, 746. You've got St. Mary's on the road against Seattle. Seattle's a sizable underdog here of 10.5 to 11 points. 135.5 to 137.5 is the total. I'm in on the under. I saw my total at a 133.5, and I do like the points with Seattle. Now, Seattle has not been great with their offense. They're in 10th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they're a relatively mid-tempo team, actually. They're about 162nd in terms of total possessions per game. St. Mary's back to playing very slow and controlled. They're 307th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but what has been rough for the Seattle team has been turning the ball over a little bit more than what you'd like. St. Mary's not a team that's going to generate turnovers. They're about 270th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a Seattle team that's been very supreme here. Top 25 team in terms of turnovers created on a per possession basis. Two really good defenses as well. St. Mary's 17th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. 26th for Seattle. Now, St. Mary's is actually shooting really well from three-point range. 38.4% as a collective this season, but that does go way downward when they're away from home. Away from home, they shoot 32.1% compared to 42.1% at home. So full 10 percentage points down. You've got Joshua Dent along with Mikey Lewis combining for about 26 points per game. Between the two of them, they shoot about 37% for three. Paulius Marsoukas, 19 points, about 7.5 rebounds per game. St. Mary's back in the top 12 in the country with regards to rebound percentage. And that's going to be a little bit tough for the Seattle team to be able to match up with, as Seattle, they're right around about 326th with regards to rebound percentage. So that size disparity is going to be getting to them a little bit. Harry Wessels is able to give you about 5 points, 5 boards per contest as well. And you have to throw this in your St. Mary's. If they find themselves in a pressure spot, they do shoot 80.5% at the free throw line. That is a top 2 mark in all of college basketball. But for Seattle, you do have a nice shoot-all player headlining things in Braden Maldonado with about 14 points. He shoots 92% at the free throw line, 36.5% from 3-point range. Seattle country average team shooting about 33% from the outside, but they've also been really good with their interior defense. They're a top 55 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, top 85 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. And Seattle, they're not allowing too many second and third chances where they really struggle on the glass, is giving themselves any sort of second and third chances. They've also been outside the top 225 with their ball security, but John Sukio, Will Hembright, they both give you between 11.5 to 12 points per game, with Hembright being able to slide 2.5 blocks per contest. Austin Maurer has been able to throw in there about 5 rebounds per game. Haran Don has been not necessarily giving you as many shot blocks as he did a season ago, but still a really nice disruptor down low. I do think that this is going to be a slog of a game. I think that this Seattle team is going to do a nice job with regards to their perimeter defense to be able to hold in this game. Set my line at 7.5, so taking the points here with Seattle, and I'm in on the under. Set my total 133.5, 747, 748. BYU is on the road against Arizona. Arizona is a double-figure favorite as you're laying 12.5 to 12 points with them. 165.5 to 166 is the total. Made a total of 163. I'm in on the under. Have to think that the Richie Saunders injury is going to be affecting BYU. I initially had them as more like an 8.5 to a 9-point underdog. Did put this up to 11, but I do think that for BYU, you're going to have guys rally around with the injury to Saunders, who was giving you about 18 points per game, and he was shooting about 37.5% from 3-point range. Wasn't necessarily your main facilitator, though. That'd be Robert Wright, who's being able to give you 18.5 points, 5 assists, shoots 46% from 3, and the only other player that's active that gives you over 7.5 points per game, AJ DeBonso, who's been Mr. Do-It-All, 24.5 points, 6.5 boards, 4 assists, shoots 36% from 3, but I do think that Kennard Davis is going to be able to step up 7 points per game. He's not necessarily been the greatest 3-point shooter in the world, but now you're probably going to be looking to Mihailo Bosovic. He's a 6'8", little bit of a stretch big man that's able to shoot it a bit from 3-point range, comes over from overseas where he was playing professionally, so I do think that there's quite a bit of upside with him. And then you still have Kabakita, who's able to give you 7 rebounds per game. Arizona is a top 20 team with regards to rebound percentage, and it's an Arizona team that, despite the losses that they took last week, this is still one of the most complete teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. A top 30 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are Mambo number 5, and for Arizona, you do have a nice edge down low with having Toby Awaka coming off the bench for darn near a double-double. He's been supplying the team with 10 points, 9.7 rebounds per game. Braden Burries, along Koa Pete, they combine for about 28.5 points per game. Burries has been able to shoot 37% for 3. Pete, all of a sudden, now shooting 33% 33% from the outside as well. Arizona not necessarily going to generate a ton of turnovers, so it's an Arizona group that they're okay but not amazing with their outside shooting. They shoot about 35.5% for 3-point. You're a little bit better down low. They're a top 50 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, and BYU has fallen outside the top 50 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, about 130th in terms of 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. But I do think that in this spot they're going to be able to hold in there. Obviously the Saunders injury is rough, but I think that the other guys are a little bit better than what the bookmakers are giving them credit for. Made a total of 163, so I'm in on the under and the points here with BYU. 749, 750. Kansas is on the road against Oklahoma State. The Cowboys of Oklahoma State do find themselves as a sizable underdog here of 5.5 to 6 points. 156.5 is the total. I made my line 5.5, so I'm going to be willing to take 6+ with the Oklahoma State team. That's very much going to be looking to push tempo. 7th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Kansas a much more mid-tempo team. Right now, they're checking in right around about 211th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and name the game for Kansas holding up defensively. This defense has been absolutely spectacular in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are 28th in the country. Really doesn't take any sort of a fall off when they're away from home as well, and they're one of the best teams in terms of being able to guard the perimeter as well. Kansas is not allowing any sort of good looks from 3-point range whatsoever. They're 23rd in the country in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, and then you have Lori Badunga, who's been able to give you 9+ boards, 2.5 blocks, double-figure amount of points. Obviously, the top scorer is Aaron Peterson. Don't know if he's going to play a full allotment of minutes, but he should be good to go on this one. 19.5 points, shoots 41% for 3, but even if he doesn't give you a ton, you still have Trey White, who's been able to shoot 40% for 3, 13.5 points per game, and it's actually suffering Melvin Council, 14 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, mid-30s 3-point shooter. Kansas in a pressure spot. They do shoot about 76.5% at the free throw line. That's big. They don't give themselves a lot of second and third chances, though. They're outside the top 240 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and that helps out because this is an Oklahoma State team that has been surrendering a lot of second and third chances. They're outside the top 225 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Oklahoma State has also been sloppy with the ball. They're outside the top 200 with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and if there's one thing that this Kansas team is not doing, it's generating turnovers. As this team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis on defense is 347th in the country, and in games played away from home, that's a bottom 5 mark. Oklahoma State not amazing with regards to generating turnovers, but in the top 150 at home. And then you've got a guy in Anthony Roy who's able to just headline things, shoots 42% for 3 on 8 threes per game, 17.5 points per game. Pascal Fala, 14.5 points, 6 boards. You've got Christian Coleman, give you about 4.5 boards, 9.5 points, mid-30s 3-point shooter. Recognized at Oklahoma State well outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but with Kansas not really being able to take advantage of the weaknesses of Oklahoma State, I think that they hold in there, and Oklahoma State good at getting to the free throw line. They shoot about 73.5% of the charity stripe. I think that they hold in there at Stillwater. Semi-total 157.5, so we'll take 6+ here with Oklahoma State, and with this total, I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the over 751, 752 Pacific. Let me be specific. They are on the road against Washington State. Washington State, a 1.5 point favorite. Draw this game is between 144 to a 144.5, and I'm going to be in on this over. I said my total 147.5. Now I recognize the Pacific not really looking to push a lot of tempo. 293rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Washington State, their team has been relatively mid-tempo this season as well. They're down to about 186 in terms of total possessions per game, but for Washington State, even though they are a team that they turn the ball over a ton, they're outside the top 3 in terms of ball security. Pacific has the same deficiency, and neither of these teams generate a ton of turnovers, and Washington State, they're just canning threes at home. They shoot 39.6% from 3-point range at home, but even with that, I did set Pacific as a 1.5 point favorite. I like them on the money line as Pacific has been shooting 38.5% from 3-point range away from home. So I do think that with both of these teams, you're going to have fewer turnovers than what they typically experience. I think that both of these teams are going to knock down some shots, and then if you have to go to the free throw line, it's a Pacific team that has been executing well at the line, 78% away from home. That's a top 30 mark in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for Washington State, they shoot about 74.3% in their home games, and it is a Washington State team that certainly has been giving it up on the defensive side of things. For Washington State, you've got Break Glass in case of emergency, Ace Glass, who's right now supplying 16.5 points, shoots 37.5% for 3. Rehard Varver shoots 44% for 3, 11.5 points per contest, and then Andy Okafor, Emil Yeho, both give you 4.6 rebounds per game between the two of them, 21 points per game. Okafor doesn't shoot threes. Yeho about 41% from the outside, but for this Washington State team, to their credit, they've been really good on the defensive glass. They're a top 50 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Pacific is the exact same, and right now for Washington State, they are outside the top 250 in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Pacific, much better with this regard. Pacific has been a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They do allow opponents to shoot just a hair above 33% from 3-point range. That's more around about country average, but if you look at their games away from home, that does go to about about 35.5% from three. Still not awful, though. Still better than Washington State. Elias Ralph, 16.5 points, shoots 40% from three. TJ Wainwright, 39.5% three-point shooter, 13.5 points per game. And then Isaac Jack along Justin Rushland, they combine to be able to give you about 10.5 rebounds per game, both about 9 to 9.5 points per game. I do think that Pacific has enough to be able to get the job done here. Neither team is going to generate a lot of turnovers, which helps you out to the over. So, like the over and Pacific on the money line, 753, 754. Illinois is on the road against USC, and USC is a sizable home underdog of 8.5 to 9.5 points. 152.5 to 153.5 is the total, and I'd like the over, semi-total at a 155. USC is going to be looking to push some tempo. They've been a little bit slower with all the injuries, but still 25th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Illinois is not looking to push tempo right now. In terms of total possessions per game, they are 313th, but it's an Illinois team that is going to allow you to have clean possessions. They're a bottom 5 team in the country in terms of generating turnovers, and USC has been outside the top 225 in their ball security. Illinois is just focused on being able to execute themselves. They are numero uno in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. USC is more around about 136, but with USC, it's been a lot of mixing and shaking with this team. Now they're able to form sort of what they've got for the rest of the season because now they know what they have. Elijah Arenas, he was dealing with injury towards the beginning part of the season. Since he's come back for this team, he's been very good. In 7 games, 15.5 points. Doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3, but it's a nice driver. And then you've got Chad Baker-Mazzaros, really that do-it-all guy, 18.5 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, shoots about 36% from 3-point range. And ever since they've given Cam Woods more minutes as well, he's really been able to step up. Overall for the season, 8.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists per game, but he's been able to supply for the team 13 plus points in 4 of the last 5 games. Never's going to be a great 3-point shooter, but a guy that does a nice job in terms of driving it inside. And then for Illinois, how about Keaton Wagler? 18.5 points on 42% 3-point shooting. Davi Modosic, 39% 3-point shooter, 13 points per game. Illinois is going to have the size advantage on the glass as this is an Illinois team that's a top 10 team with regards to overall rebound percentage. Meanwhile, you've got a USC team that has been more around about 92nd in terms of rebound percentage, but Jacob Kofi gives you about 2 blocks. He's able to throw in there 5 plus rebounds per game, and it's a USC team that is a top 25 team in terms of shot block rate that's very on par with Illinois, and Illinois now getting back Kylan Boswell for about 14 points per game. That's going to be able to help them out offensively as well. I do think that Illinois gets the job done, but keep in mind that they're going to have to travel through multiple time zones with them not generating a lot of turnovers. I do think that helps this USC team remain lively. So sub line at 7, won't take the points with the USC and made a total of 155, so I'm in on the over 755, 756. Pepperdine is going to be on there against Portland. Portland is a 6.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 150.5, and I mean, my line is 6.5 as well. Seeing right now a few straight 6s popping up, I would be willing to lay 6 with Portland, and I recognize that this is a Portland team that is not taking any sort of care of the ball whatsoever, but the good news is neither is Pepperdine. These are two teams that have been incredibly sloppy with the ball. Pepperdine 299th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, away from one that falls outside the top 320. Portland 330th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and neither of these defenses are really going to be putting you under a lot of duress. For Portland, where they're looking to really be able to win this game is on the inside, as they have been a top 100 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, even with Timo George missing the last 12 games. You still have a guy in Joe Foxwell that's done a nice job headlining things, 15 points, 4 boards, 7 assists, shoots about 33% from 3, and then Makai Balu has been a 35% 3-point shooter, splashing in there about 10 points per contest for Portland. They've been able to do an okay job in terms of getting to the free throw line. They shoot about 73.5% at the charity stripe. Now, one thing that Pepperdine has done a good job of, they really don't put you on the free throw line, but Portland sort of dares you to shoot from 3. In terms of opponents' field goal attempts that come from 3-point range, they're a top 55 team in the country there, and Pepperdine is right now shooting a hearty 30.3% from 3. That is a bottom 30 mark in the country. Aaron Clark, he's been able to shoot about 35.5% from 3, and Danilo Dosic shoots 36.5% for the outside. Dosic is 6'10", 11.5 points per contest, but doesn't grab any rebounds. Clark, he's been able to give you about 14.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game, but nobody else on the roster shoots above 32.5% from 3. Style fifth, 13 points, 6 boards, 5 assists, a steal per contest, so he's been able to do a little bit of this and that, but it's also a Pepperdine team that's outside the top 270 with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. They really don't put you under duress a ton on defense, and I do think that with Portland being able to execute the way that they do on the inside, it is a Portland team that is not going to grab for themselves any sort of second and third chances, but you have a Pepperdine team that they themselves are outside the top 275 with regards to rebound percentage. That Portland on their own floor gets the job done, and even though it's a pair of defenses that are well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, you're not going to get a ton of tempo, especially with this Pepperdine team being well outside the top 150 in terms of total possessions per game. So set a total of 144.5 in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 6 here with Portland, 757, 758. Boise State is on the road against Utah State. Utah State is a favorite of 9.5 to 10 points, 151.5 to 152.5 is the total line. Set a line of 8.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Boise State. Boise State has no doubt had their struggles all season long, but it feels like they haven't had much of a drop-off with their play when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. It's a Boise State team that overall is 83rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but in games played away from home, that actually ascends into the top 50, and for Utah State, this group has been a top 20 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but again, that does fall outside the top 35 when they're at home. For Utah State, this is a top 15 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but Boise State is not going to allow you to get second and third chances. Top 12 team in terms of percentage of opponents' missed shots that they just do not rebound. So Boise State is allowing teams to grab fewer than 23% of their misses as an offensive rebound, and for Utah State, saw the top player in this game in MJ Collins, 18.5 points, been shooting about 38.5% from three, but Mason Fosloff, he's so versatile, 16.5 points, 3 assists, 2 steals, 5.5 boards, shoots 42% from three. One, two guys on the roster that give you double figures. Now, you love Drake Allen, give you about 5 assists per game. You've had Kobe King be able to shoot about 42.5% from three. It is a Utah State team that's executing really well down low, not just on offense, but also on defense. Top 45 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, top 10 team with their own two-point shooting percentage, but I think that Boise State is going to be able to hold their own with Andrew Meadow and Drew Fielder combining for about 26 points per game. Between the two of them, they're shooting about 40% from three-point. You've been able to have Fielder give you 5.5 rebounds per game. Dominic Parolin has been able to give you about 5 boards. Javon Buchanan, 4.5 rebounds. So these guys have been able to do a nice job in tandem for Boise State. This team does not put you under duress whatsoever. They're about 300th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and they will give it up from three. Boise State is allowing teams to shoot over 36% from three-point. So that's a big, giant issue, but with Boise State, they are a team that's been able to do a relatively solid job on the glass, and they do a great job in terms of getting to the free throw line. And when Boise State is there, top 30 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis, they shoot 77.7% at the free throw line. That is a top 30 mark in the country. I think that that's going to be able to help them hold in there. Now, I did set a total of 149.5. Utah State is not necessarily the most up-tempo team in the world. They're about 174th in terms of total possessions per game. Boise State, also a relatively mid-tempo team at 187. So, like the under and the points here with Boise State, 759, 760. Gonzaga is going to be on the road against San Francisco, and the Dons of San Francisco are a sizable underdog at home. They are between 14 to 14.5 point dogs. 149.5 to 150 is the total line for Gonzaga. I did set them as a favorite of 13.5 points, so we'll take 14 plus here with San Francisco. Getting back Bookie Cook is big for San Francisco, guy that's been able to give you about 40% three-point shooting. At full force, he will give you about 10 points per contest, down to about 9 points because he's been playing through a little bit of injury, but you still have a trio of guys in Tyron Riley, David Fuchs, Ryan Beasley. They give you between 11.4 and 13.8 points per game. Beasley very hit or miss with his three-point shooting, but Fuchs has been able to give you 7.5 boards, 12 points per game, and then Riley has been able to give you about 11.5 points per game. Now, the one thing that San Francisco is not going to do is put you under duress. They're outside the top 330 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. San Francisco overall has been about 200th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Strangely, giving up more points per possession at home rather than away from home, but they also don't allow a lot of second and third chances as well. For the San Francisco team, they're 38th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Now, Gonzaga's forte this year has actually been on the defensive side of things. They're 6th in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so no second and third chances to be had here for this San Francisco team. And you just look at Gonzaga in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and right now this team is number 3 in all of college basketball, though they do give up about 19.9 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home. And for Gonzaga, it's right now all about Graham Ike because they're still dealing with the injury to Braden Huff. For Ike, 20 points, 8.5 boards since he's come back from injury, well above 20 points per game, but Gonzaga just not the same shooting team that they've been in the past. Country average team shooting about 34.2% from three. You do have Mario Saint-Sapri give you 8.5 points, shoots 43% from three. Tying Grant Foster, he's a little bit of a gadget guy with about a block, a steal, 11.5 points, 5 rebounds per game, but he shoots less than 30% from 3 points. Davis Vogel in a little bit of a, shall we say, bigger dosage, has been seeing a bit of a decrease with regards to his efficiency. Gonzaga is still nice in terms of being able to take care of the ball. They're a top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and I do think that that's going to be just enough to be able to get you over. San Francisco is more of a low-tempo team, 269th in terms of total possessions per game. Gonzaga is still gunning it, 52nd in the country, so I did set a total of 151.5. I do think that the efficiency gets you over, but I think that San Francisco holds in there, so we'll take the points with the Dons, and I'm going to be in on the over semi-total 151.5. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 761, 662, you've got UNLV playing against Colorado State, and Colorado State is a underdog here of 1 to 1.5 points. 148.5 is the total, and made a total of a 149. 148.5 is my max buy point on the over, and we're going to have a tempo war here. Colorado State, in terms of total possessions per game, they are currently 363rd in the country. UNLV is very much looking to fly at 50th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I do like Colorado State on the money line. It is a Colorado State team that's been outside the top 200 with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis in terms of their offense, but when they don't turn it over, this team is an explosive shooting team. Top 12 team with regards to their three-point shooting percentage for Colorado State. They're overall 39th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Really doesn't take any sort of a drop-off when they're away from home. Meanwhile, UNLV, they're about 155th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and it's a UNLV team that they themselves have had a little bit of an issue in terms of taking care of the ball, and this is a UNLV team that is going to give up some relatively good looks from three-point range. UNLV has been able to get good production out of Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn. He's supplying right now 19 points per game. In that big comeback that they had a few nights ago when they were going up against Boise State, he had 36 big ones there, 24-plus points in each of the last 5 games. He's kicked it up there, but who's going to join him? Tyron Jones has been able to give you a pair of blocks, about 11 points per game. Kamani Hamilton shoots 36% from three, 12 points per game, but in specifically their home games, UNLV shoots less than 31% from three-point range, and they're allowing opponents to shoot 36% from three, the absolute forte of Colorado State. They're outside the top 300 with that regard. This is just not a good battle for them, as for Colorado State, you've got each of your top 4 scorers right now shooting at least 39.4% from three, all but one of them shooting at least 42% from three, with Josh Passarelli, 42% three-point shooting, 11 points per game. Gary Booth, about 6 boards, 10 points, shoots 42% for three. Kyle Jorgensen, 12.5 points, 2.5 assists, 44% three-point shooter. Brandon Redshiner, 2.5 assists, 11.5 points, shoots 39.4% from three-point. And then Kevin Mooney says 6'6", a little bit of point forward, 4 boards, 4.5 assists, 9.5 points per game. Now, Colorado State just atrocious with their defense as well. Outside the top 240 with regards to opponents' 2-point and three-point shooting percentage. They don't generate any turnovers whatsoever. They're outside the top 300 with that regard, but even with that, I think that Colorado State just executes really well on offense. For Colorado State, they also shoot 77% of the free throw line. That's a top 35 mark, and UNLV is a top 10 team in the country in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis on defense. So I set my line at 3 with Colorado State the favorite. I like Colorado State on the money line and the over. Semi-total 149, and now we have the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306 557, 306 558. You've got Holy Cross playing host to Lafayette. Lafayette is anywhere between a 1-point favorite to a 1.5 point underdog, depending upon your book. 135.5 to 137.5 is your total. Relative toss-up game, I made Holy Cross a 1.5 point favorite, so I'm going to look for a book that has them as an underdog and take them on the money line. If I have to lay one, I have to lay one, as Holy Cross has actually been a top 150 team with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you've got a Lafayette team that just has not been able to do a high flop for you on offense in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Not calling Holy Cross great. They're about 282nd, but for Lafayette, they just seem to be really relying upon 2 guys. Caleb Williams, doing out the Bears quarterback, 16.5 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, shoots 35% for three. Andrew Phillips, 14.5 points, 4.5 boards, he shoots 33% for three. Nobody else gives you double figures, so Mark Butler has been able to give you about 4 assists per game. To their credit, Lafayette, top 125 team, in terms of taking care of the ball, but this is also a Lafayette team that's outside the top 250 with regards to opponents' 2-point and three-point shooting percentage. And for Holy Cross, they have to deal with a few injuries. Joe Nugent has been out of the fold for this team as a 6'6", little bit of a combo player. I'm thinking that he's going to be out once again, but even with them out, you've got Tyler Boston give you 13.5 points, shoots 36% from three, and Holy Cross was atrocious with their three-point shooting to begin the season. All of a sudden, it's starting to come back for them, and this is a Holy Cross team that has been able to shoot it much better from three-point range when they've been at home rather than away from home. For Holy Cross, right now, they shoot 35.5% from three-point range at home, 30.5% when they're away from home. Holy Cross not going to give themselves any sort of second and third chances. One of the most atrocious offensive rebound rate teams in all of college basketball. Top 150 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They get bludgeons inside, but they do a nice job in terms of guarding the perimeter. They shoot 73.5% the free throw line. 8 into Sue has been able to give 10.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Gabe Warren throws in there about 11.5 points per contest. With Lafayette just not being an efficient team, and this most likely being a very slow game. Holy Cross here in 44th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Lafayette, they're checking in a nice already 291st. I do think that Holy Cross gets the job done. I think that you get just enough efficiency and just enough late game following for the over. So semi-total 137.5. You're at the 136.5, 135.5. Like the over, and Holy Cross on the money line as an underdog. 36.559, 36.560. Bucknell plays us to American. American is a 2.5 point favorite total on this game. 139.5 to 140.5. Made a total of a 140. Personally, I would rather have the 139.5 to the over rather than the 140.5 to the under, even though you've got two teams that are not pushing tempo. For American, 279th in terms of total possessions per game. Bucknell is 253rd. Bucknell has been awful on offense, by the way, 324th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Not calling you American monsters of the Midway, but they are in the top 200 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And with American, I did set them as a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it because they have been a top 75 team in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Bucknell's not taking care of the ball. They are outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. They shoot 30.5% from 3-point range. That's outside the top 3. Their 2-point shooting percentage hovering right around 300th. But for Bucknell, they are a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage at 37.9%. They're about 300th with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Bucknell is getting killed on the glass. They're outside the top 3 with that regard. Amon Doris, who comes over from Germany, 15 points, about 4.5 rebounds per game. But Raju Babajek, who's been your number 2 scorer, has been dealing with injury. Pat Curtin, who's giving you about 11.5 points per game, should be good to go here, but he's been dealing with ailment as well. You've got all sorts of banged up guys. Brandon McCreesh, who's supposed to be their top 3-point shooter, he continues to be out of the fold for the team. Meanwhile, for American, top 2 scorers really don't light you up from 3-point range. Made and Collins along Greg Jones. These 2 guys combined for about 26 points per game. Neither guy shoots above 27.5% from 3, but Jalen Ita-Ribe, 5 boards, 10.5 points. He throws in there about 35% 3-point shooting. Jeff Spruce, White, and Adesis both shoot above 38.5% from 3, a combined 17.5 points per game. For American, at a pressure spot, they shoot 75.5% the free throw line. That's a top 80 mark in the country for American. They're in the top 250 with regards to rebound percentage, which is much more than what you could say for Bucknell. They've been a top 100 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. Do think that American goes out there, gets the job done in a game just enough for the over. So semi-total 148 at 139.5. I'm in on the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 3.5 with American. 36.561, 36.562. You've got Army, and they're going to be on the road against Loyola Maryland. Loyola Maryland is a 4.5-point favorite. Total on this game 146.5 to 147.5. I made Loyola the favorite of 4.5 points. So 5 does become my buy point on Army. It's an Army team that is a top 20 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range. Army overall is 275th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, which obviously is no bueno, but you look at them away from home, that goes up into the top 200, and it's an Army team that they only shoot about 31.5 to 32% from 3-point range away from home, but you've got a guy in Ryan Curry who I think is going to keep you lively. 14 points, 4 boards, 4.5 assists, shoots 36.5% from 3-point range, and then the Jacksons, Jackson Furman, Jackson Bell, they combined to shoot about 37.5% from the outside. Between the two of them, 21.3 points per game, and then Tate Lazowski is able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game for Loyola Maryland. They've been dealing with some injuries, but they should have most of their guys back. Jacob Tadusu, your really main do-it-all guy, 14 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals per contest. He should be back for Loyola Maryland. They're outside the top 200 with regards to turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Honestly, a pretty good 3-point shooting defense. They're allowing teams to shoot 32% for 3, getting pounded on the inside. Outside the top 300 with their own 2-point shooting percentage. They've been a country average team with their own 3-point shooting, and this is a Loyola Maryland team that's another top 50 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range. And Army has not been the world's worst team on the glass. They're a top 175 team in terms of rebound percentage. They are a team that's going to give up a little bit from the outside, as for Army right now, they're allowing you to shoot 36.7% from 3-point range in games played away from home. That has been all sorts of less than savory, and for Loyola Maryland, they're more around about 32.5%, but with Jordan Steinke, give you about 9.5 points, only about 3 rebounds per game. It's not necessarily a team that's strong on the inside, and for Loyola Maryland, if they need to cover at the free throw line, they shoot 69.5% the free throw line. That is outside the top 270 in all of college basketball. I do think that Army is going to be able to remain lively, and both of these teams are relatively mid-tempo teams. For Loyola Maryland, 165th in terms of total possessions per game, Army 218th. I think that you get enough efficiency from the outside to be able to get you the over. Semi-total 115.5, like the over, and 5+ here with Army. 306, 563, 306, 564. Queens SC is going to be on the road against North Alabama, and North Alabama is a 7.5 to an 8.5 point home underdog. Total on this game, it is 155.5 with North Alabama. I set them as an underdog, 6.5 points. I'm going to be one to take the points, mainly because you've got a Queens NC defense that, man, are they rough. 346th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, North Alabama, they're not lighting up the world with their defense either. 342nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, outside the top 350 in their home games, by the way. And you've got a Queens NC team that has actually been a really efficient offense this year. Right now, the 34th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They do average 21.2 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home, though. And North Alabama 291st in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. But they do have the top rebounder in this game, and that would be one Mr. Cornelius Williams, who's continuing to give you about 9 rebounds per game. Throws in there about 12 points per contest. Dante Bacchus has been able to supply about 15.5 points per game. Gives you about 5.5 rebounds. Now, North Alabama needs to shoot it better from 3-point range. They shoot 31.1%. That's outside the top 300 in all all of college basketball. They also are about 300th with their free throw shooting percentage at 68%. They do take relatively okay care of the ball, though. They've been a top 175 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Now, they defensively are one of the worst teams in terms of generating turnovers in the country, but that said, I did set a total here of a 154.5 because they also do a nice job slowing things down to 90th in terms of total possessions per game. Queens NC is about 90th, so they're looking to push some tempo, and for Queens NC, you've got Nasir Man, who's been the man to be able to give you 12.5 points, throws in their 5.5 boards, shoots only about 32.5% for three, but Devontae Parker, Jordan Wofford, they combine for 23.5 points per game, both shoot above 45% from three-point. Carson Schwieger, along with Maben Jabriel, both shoot 42.9% from the outside as well, so I do think that you're going to have some made threes in this game, but I do think that North Alabama is going to be able to slow it down. I do think that North Alabama is going to be able to do a relatively good job on the glass against Queens NC team that's outside the top 200 with regards to rebound percentage, and I think that keeps them lively. So set my line at 6.5. I'm willing to take 7+ here with North Alabama, and I like the under semi total a 154.5. 365.65, 365.66. Florida Gulf Coast is going to be playing us to Jacksonville. Jacksonville is an underdog at 6.5 points. 136.5 to 137.5 is the total. I'm in on the over. I set my total at a 140. You've got a Florida Gulf Coast team that has been slowed down a little bit more recently, but still 83rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Jacksonville's super slow, 331st in terms of total possessions per game, but Jacksonville is not a good defense at all. Jacksonville is right now, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, a nice hearty 309th in the country. Falls outside the top 315 when they're away from home. Florida Gulf Coast not playing any defense themselves, 278th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And to the credit of Jacksonville, they've been a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. But I mean, this is a Jacksonville group that they right now have one guy that's giving you over 10 points per game. Hayden Wood with 10.1 points per game, shoots 39% from three-point range, but for Jacksonville as a whole, they're outside the top 275 with their three-point shooting percentage. Not the world's worst team at being able to generate offense on the inside for Jacksonville. They've been a top 200 team with their two-point shooting percentage in games played away from home, ascends into the top 175. Florida Gulf Coast, country average team, 156 with regards to their two-point shooting percentage, but I do think that they're going to be able to find good looks from three-point range. Dunk City, they shoot 35.8% from three-point range. That's a top 75 mark in all of college basketball, and this is a Jacksonville team that is not guarding the three-point line very well. They are allowing teams to shoot from three-point range a nice cool 37.4%, 348th in the country, and you don't have a single guy for Jacksonville that's giving you over 5 rebounds per game, as you have Jason Thirdkill, Donovan Rivers, both combining for about 9.5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for Florida Gulf Coast, they've been dealing with a little bit of injury, but they do have J.R. Krasinski back. He's been your top scorer with about 15.5 points, shoots in the mid-30s from three. Jordan Ellerby, he's eating good in the neighborhood, shooting 40% from three-point in a pressure spot. Florida Gulf Coast, they shoot about 72% of the free throw line. Neither here nor there. It's a Jacksonville team that, if you put them on the free throw line, they shoot the exact same 70.9%, so they're relative equals there. But that's it for this Florida Gulf Coast team, being able to have Michael Dwalks be able to give you about 7 points, 5 boards, a little bit of versatility, and for Florida Gulf Coast, being a top 225 team in terms of taking care of the ball. Can't say that for Jacksonville. I think that that's enough for them to get the job done. Semi-line at 8, willing to lay with Dunk City, and I'm in on the over. Semi-total at a 140. 306.567, 306.568. You've got West Georgia, and they're going to be on the road against Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky, 5.5 point favorite. So on this game, 156.5. And I did set Eastern Kentucky here as a favorite of just 3 points. So I'm going to be willing to take the points. West Georgia is rough with their defense. They're outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But got an Eastern Kentucky team that's outside the top 300 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis. And West Georgia is pushing a nice tempo. They're about 92nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Eastern Kentucky, they're about 135th. And for Eastern Kentucky, they are allowing teams at home to shoot 37.2% from three-point range. West Georgia, they're allowing teams to shoot 35.7% in games played away from home, and it's an Eastern Kentucky team that has not done the world's greatest job in terms of executing on offense. They're outside the top 150 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Now, West Georgia, they do see a drop-off of about 12.5 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. They're about 250th in terms of points per possession, but this West Georgia team away from home, they shoot 35.7% from three-point range, and they've got, in my opinion, the best player in this game, Sheldon Williams, right? He's a 6'6", a little bit of a do-it-all guy, 20.5 points, 9.5 boards. He's been only shooting about 27% from three, but throws in there a steal per contest as well. And then you've had Harvey or Daniel be able to give you multiple blocks down low, 7 points, right around about 5.5 rebounds per game. The ancillary guys like Josh Smith have stepped it up with his three-point shooting 34% for three. Brady Hardwick has been able to shoot about 41% for three, only about 4.5 points per game, but it's also a West Georgia team that has been a top 175 team with regards to their offensive rebound percentage. This is an Eastern Kentucky team that's really given it up on the defensive glass. They are outside the top 225 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Now, I will say this, they are also doing a great job in terms of grabbing a lot of second and third chances for themselves as well. Eastern Kentucky, 82nd in the country with regards to offensive rebound percentage, so second and third chances going to be very prevalent in this game, but also outside the top 3 with regards to bonus 2-point shooting percentage. Juan Cranford, Turner Buttery combined for 22.6 points per game and 36% 3-point shooting. Montavious Myrick, 11.5 points, 7 rebounds per game. Jalen Cooper, when he's been out there, he's been able to give you 6 rebounds per game, has been dealing with a little bit of ailment, but should be good to go here. Just returned a few games ago, and I do think that this is going to be a nice up and down game that Western Georgia is going to be able to hold in. I did set my line here at a 3, so I'm going to be willing to take the points. Eastern Kentucky, they are a team that's playing a little bit slower than they have in the past. I do think that they're doing a much better job of generating turnovers at home rather than away from home, which I think is going to be just enough to keep you under. So semi-total 155 in on the under to go along with West Georgia. 306-569, 306-570. Navy plays also Lehigh. Lehigh is an underdog here of 9.5 points. So on this game, 139.5 to 140.5. Semi-total 130.5. I'm in on the under. This is a Navy team that's not looking to push any tempo whatsoever. In terms of total possessions per game, 319th in the country. Lehigh much more of a mid-tempo team at about 158th, and Lehigh is looking to make you pile drive the ball down low. They are 10th in the country in terms of opponents' field goal attempts that come from 2-point range. Maybe those been a top 75 team with their 2-point shooting percentage at home. This is a Lehigh team that is just getting pounded on the boards. They're outside the top 340 with regards to rebound percentage. Navy is a top 75 team with regards to rebound percentage, and Navy overall is a top 35 unit in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Hassan Benjini is one of the better mid-major scorers, so you're going to find 17.5 points on 44% 3-point shooting. Jim Woo Kim shoots 38.5% from the outside, but this team is just going to plow you on the glass. Don Draper does it all. 9 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists, 2 steals per contest, 8 in KOA, 15.5 points, 10.5 rebounds per game, shoots 74% from the floor. It's a Navy team that has really done a nice job in terms of dictating the tenor of a lot of their games, and they're also a top 150 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. Meanwhile, for this Lehigh group, you've got Nasir Woodlock, who's been able to supply 20 points, 3 assists, shoots 42.5% for 3, and this is a Lehigh team that here in conference play, they're shooting 37.5% from 3 points, but Navy has been such a good 3-point shooting defense that I don't think that they're going to be able to get those good looks anymore. For this Navy team, they're allowing you to shoot less than 30.5% from 3-point range. As a matter of fact, it's down to 29.6% from 3-point range. That is 13th in all of college basketball. Hank Alvey has been able to give you versatility, 7 boards, 14.5 points, 2 blocks per contest, and then you've got a 37.5% 3-point shooter in Mr. Joshua Ingram, who's been able to give you 11 points per game, but I think the Navy just sucks the life out of this Lehigh team. Semi-total at a 130.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 12 with Navy, set them as 12.5 point favorite. 306-571, 306-572. Lipscomb is going to be on the road against Bellarmine. Bellarmine is a 3.5 point home underdog, 158.5 is the total. Semi-total 158, so this is my absolute minimum buy point on the under, but I like Bellarmine here on the money line. Bellarmine has been able to do a really good job in terms of executing their interior offense. They're a top 15 team in the country with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, 46 overall in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Lipscomb, when they've been at home, has been a relatively good team in terms of generating turnovers, haven't necessarily had that be able to translate away from home. Lipscomb is 332nd in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage away from home as well, and let's say that this game gets tight. Lipscomb is a good free throw shooting team. They shoot over 75% of the free throw line, top 70 team there, but this Bellarmine team, they are shooting 83+% of the free throw line at home. That is number 2 in the country, and this is a Lipscomb team that, to their credit, they don't really put you on the free throw line a ton. Good versatility with Grant Asman at 6'10", 14.5 points, 6 boards, shoots 38.5% from 3, and then Charlie Williams, 36% 3-point shooter, about 11 points per game. He's right around about 6'10" as well. Bellarmine, by the way, 362nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're playing in no defense whatsoever. Bellarmine is playing at a very, very slow and controlled tempo, though, so that's a big reason why I am in on the under. Bellarmine, in terms of total possessions per game, 314th in all of college basketball. And they are giving up more than 15 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home, but for Lipscomb, this is a team that's also giving up quite a bit from the outside as well. They're well outside the top 235 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Mateo Esmeraldo, 7 assists, 10.5 points per game. You do like what he's able to bring to the table, but I think that Jack Karsinski gets you the win here for Bellarmine, 20.5 points, 5 boards. He's been very good in terms of giving this team a little bit more around the outside as well, 42% 3-point shooting, and then Keenan Gooding has been able to shoot 43% from 3 with about 12 points per game. Tyler Doyle, O'Doyle rules with about 3.5 assists, does a nice job keeping things clean. Bellarmine, top 125 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and Bellarmine, they're not going to pull in their second and third chances. They're a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but I do think that they do just a good enough job in terms of executing to be able to get the job done. So Bellarmine is a 2-point favorite. I'm taking them on the money line, and I like the under. So I total 158. Wrap things up with 306-573, 306-574. NC Central is on the road. They're facing off against South Carolina State. South Carolina State, home underdogs of 3.5 points, 139.5 to 140 is the total, and made a total of 146. I like the over. Now, both of these teams are atrocious in really all facets of basketball. Both of these teams outside the top 327 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. NC Central shoots it much better from three-point away from home rather than at home, though. 28.4% at home, 34.9% away from home, which is honestly a top 125 mark in all of college basketball. South Carolina State has been able to shoot it relatively well from three-point range at home as well. 34.8%. Now, South Carolina State, they're committing nearly 15 turnovers per game in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. They're outside the top 350 in all of college basketball. And NC Central, they have been a top 75 team in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis on defense. South Carolina State in the top 100 as well, but for NC Central, they're 13th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis when they're at home. That takes a big giant drop off when they're away from home to about 102nd. And I do think that for South Carolina State, they do find a way to persevere here because you just have a little bit more depth with regards to your scoring. As right now, Gage Lattimore for NC Central has been able to do a nice job, give you about 16 points per game, but your lone other double-figure scorer in Corey Carvey, he's been missing the last few games. He's been able to give the team 13 points per contest. Now, Deontay Johnson gives you about 6 points, 5.5 assists, throws in there a pair of steals per game, so he's able to do a nice job in terms of mixing and shaking. But then you got Jaden Johnson on the flip side for South Carolina State, 12.5 points, shoots 35% for three. Owen Bronson shoots 34.5% from the outside. He throws in there 11 points per game. Johnson and Bronson combined for about 2 steals per game, and Johnson has been able to give you about 3.5 assists per game as well. Now, this is a team that's getting pounded on the inside for the South Carolina State team, bottom 10 team in the country with their 2-point shooting percentage outside the top 335 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Is NC Central really doing a better job, though? NC Central with their 2-point shooting percentage, 283rd in the country outside the top 275 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well, and they're going to very much put you on the free throw line. South Carolina State, for as bad as they are on offense, I do think that they're going to be able to take advantage here and get the job done. I did set my line at a 2.5 with NC Central being the favorite. So at 3.5, I'm going to take the points, but not the money line with South Carolina State, and I'm going to be in on the over. So my total 146.5, and that'll wrap things up for the Wednesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the Eastern Family Podcast. A big thanks to Arielle Schafer. She does great work with play-by-play work over on ESPN, mainly in the Atlantic Sun, along with the SoCon. She joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GNet_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast with picks and analysis on every game, every day. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Take care.